Hello, everyone, and welcome to Wowhead Weekly number 221. I am Annie, or also known as Annie Fuchsia, and I am mostly spending a lot of time just streaming on Twitch, playing World of Warcraft, of course. The past week, a lot of things have happened, and one of those things being we just went through Blackwing Lair in Classic. I was almost going to call it a new raid in Classic, but it's technically not new, right? It's more like renewed. So we'll talk about that, and we also have some interesting Esports announcements to discuss, which will tie in very nicely with our special guest today. Before he is introduced, I'd like to, as always, introduce my lovely co host, Perculia.
Hey everyone, I'm Perk. I'm joined by my cat Brightpaw, and I run Wowhead, and it's always really fun to do the show and catch you up on what's going on with the site and the biggest and most controversial news items. And we're really excited to have a special guest this week because there's been lots of interesting esports and competitive updates relating to Ian doing a very good interview on the world first race and the schedule for MDI and AWC. So without further ado, please welcome Dratnos. He is a Twitch streamer and YouTuber focusing on high-end Mythic Plus content. You may have seen him writing some articles on Wowhead, as well as the weekly routes for Raider IO and casting the world first race for Limit.
Hi,
Way! Welcome!
good to be here. Sorry, I don't have a cat, but I do have my dinosaur pillow over here. It's
That counts.
a fan favorite. Yeah,
Almost alive.
Yeah.
Well, very nice to
yeah.
have you here. And a little side note, I'm sorry about that introduction thing. So the side wasn't working 100% correctly because of having a guest here. So that's why I couldn't switch to perk ASAP. But in the end, I managed to fix it before she was done talking. So you still were able to see her lovely face. So we're good and happy now. But yes, Dratnos, very nice to see you here. And it is indeed very good timing with all the new announcements lately as well, because we'd love to hear what you have to say on that. And we also have the very interesting Ian interview as well. So, yeah, we could maybe jump straight to it. Actually, I just saw a resub in the chat.
Yeah.
Aegis, 25 months of subbing to
Aw,
Wowhead.
awesome.
Thank you so much. And yeah, let me also send those notes. But yeah, Perk, feel free to go ahead as I send this.
Right. So Ian, sort of without preamble, he hasn't really been doing many QAs recently, and he just dropped this like 50-minute long interview with Warcraft Radio, talking pretty candidly about the race to world first and bug fixes they encountered and the difficulties of what happens when millions of people are seeing your bugs on the screen, and if the race to world first is an esport or not, and what's going on with that controversial cinematic. And it seemed incredibly well received because it didn't sound like total PR material. You could tell he was very passionate about the content. He didn't try to, just regurgitate the main talking points of the patch. And there was a ton of very interesting material in there. So I thought we could just touch upon some of the key points, discuss them in more detail. And it's interesting having Dratnos here as he was, casting the race that Ian was talking about and commentating on these bugs and challenges as people were encountering them. So, what did you think when Ian was talking about these visible bugs that appeared that were slowing progression, and how he thought they handled them well in some cases and poorly in other cases?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that he was mostly right about the fact that this is not abnormal. Like, this does happen pretty much every race to world first. It's only started being streamed recently, and Limit in particular have been the guilds to like make it to the end boss first and hit these bugs first more often. So even when Method was streaming and Limit wasn't, there were some bugs like on Jaina that you wouldn't have seen on Method stream that the Limit guys did have to deal with and were fixed, in the middle of their progression, that threw a lot of wrenches into the works. Overall, I think he's right that it was a fairly bug-free race. Like, Carapace had one sanity bug that was important, but it was fixed fairly quickly. And N'Zoth, aside from just one very noticeable bug, it was really not a bugged encounter at all. Like, there was nothing going on that was way out of the ordinary for that. So I think that they did a pretty good job on both tuning and on bugs this time. I do think that he was right though that they need to have like a way to communicate to everybody when something happens like that gateway. Okay, so the gateway spawned at 25% and it was not supposed to.
Mhm.
And they really need to have a way to let Limit know when that happens that was not supposed to happen, rather than having Limit then spend their next 4 hours building a strategy around that gateway, only to get there again and have it not spawn anymore. And Blizzard's like, okay, yeah, we fixed it, but we didn't tell you.
Yeah. I
Oh,
think
is
there's
that how it
also-
played out? I actually missed how it played out live. That is okay. So they were on that for 4 hours. Yeah, go ahead.
Well,
sorry.
they reached the 25% mark once, and they saw the gateway spawn, and they weren't still reliably reaching 25%, right?
No,
so
but they were
kind of adapted their
doing
whole
Right, and it's
strategy.
tactics
changes the
accordingly.
strategy,
Yeah,
because they're like, oh, it's not a burn. There's another interlude we have to do first.
Right. So
Gotcha.
they designed a strategy that got them back to the gateway with the gateway clear, because they thought that was important.
Right.
They thought the ground around the gateway needed to be clear when it didn't. And they thought they needed to get the boss to 25% only. So they thought they needed to save like cooldowns and Heart of Azeroth charges for that last, like for later. And turns out those resources weren't important at all. It was just boss damage. And to some extent, there's an element of like they need to discover these things as they progress, and Blizzard shouldn't, just tell them what the fight is supposed to look like. There's a lot of good reasons why it doesn't work that way, and Ian identified a lot of them. But when a bug causes a team to, make a bunch of wrong assumptions based off of that bug, I do think that it's reasonable then for Blizzard to be like, hang on a second, we're not going to tell you exactly how it's supposed to work, but this is not what was supposed to happen.
Yeah, I think it was compounded, or maybe the bug was blown up out of proportion by Twitch chat because it was fresh off of the cinematic disappointment, and when people really were hyping up the mythic secret phase, thinking it was going to, I don't know, make the cinematic more interesting, or was going to be a true, final secret phase, when in reality it was more of an interlude. So maybe people were like, oh, this must be a bug. There must be more, because that was just, fighting an ad in a room, and then you pop back up to the top. And, people, I think Ian mentioned in the interview, there were data mine spells they were using for abandoned concepts. And, of course, people find them and they're like, oh, yeah, wouldn't it be really cool if something horrible happened at 25% and we went back down and the room was even worse. So I feel there was a lot of people were very excited about the phase, while Blizzard just wanted to have that element of surprise, which was another interesting point, because they were talking about, should the end bosses be tested more on mythic difficulty, and Ian even admitted that usually the mythic end boss is not tested as much as the other bosses, just because the team doesn't spend as much time on it, and the raid teams only have like an hour or so to work on them on, I think, even just heroic difficulty.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to not PTR test the mythic end bosses. Like, I think that there have been a lot of iconic moments in WoW's history. Ian mentioned a couple of them as well, like seeing Cho'Gall coming out. There's this video of like nerd screams as they're killing Imperator Margok, and then Cho'Gall shows up out of nowhere and they're like, what is happening? Or like the first time you saw Argus in that red mythic phase, or when Gul'dan and Illidan drops down from that crystal in the Gul'dan fight. All of those moments would not have been surprises if they were PTR tested, right? Like those would have been a jump to find them in PTR, and then we would know that was going to happen on Mythic. So I think there's a lot of good reasons why they don't PTR test those Mythic end bosses, and I think ny'alotha there weren't really any bugs. Like, they changed how Thought Harvesters behaved, but those weren't really bugged. And there was the 25% thing, which was a big publicly visible thing that a lot of people are like, how does a bug like this even happen? But I don't know, it was just one bug. It was really not bad.
In the heat of the moment as well, I mean, like, people react passionately when there is a bug, and then that gets Twitch clipped, and then that gets sent around, and chat, and everyone is hyping up, oh my god, look at this bug. So I feel that because people weren't used to seeing mythic progression for a while, so now when there is a bug, it's really shocking, even though this has been sort of going on behind the scenes for over a decade.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think that touches on to another point Ian was saying, was that now that the race is public, people will make bigger deals out of things, and they need to improve their communication, because this race is really hype, and if they're more behind the scenes or lax about stuff, then it can maybe hurt them more than help them. So I was happy to see they wanted to have better communication now that the event was public.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense for Blizzard to, Ian was very careful to not call it an esport. Like he pushed back every time it was described as that.
Yeah, he was like, no, not an esport.
Yeah.
But it does have a lot of, it's something that Blizzard would, it's in their best interest for this to continue to thrive, right? So
for sure.
They don't want to get in its way, right? They don't want to try and take it over and kill it by doing that, but they also need to make sure that they keep allowing it to grow. And there are some things that we're hitting up against here, maybe now that it's getting big enough, that require Blizzard to update some of their systems too.
For sure. I mean, there's so many eyes around this world race, which, I mean, it was going on since, what was the first one? Was it Old Year?
Yeah, Old Year was the first.
It was the first.
Some Chinese guilds were streaming Argus.
Yes, I remember
that didn't have the same appeal. I just wanted to point them out because I remember on Reddit people were really hype when they were getting to the red phase.
Right, that was so cool.
Yeah,
my whole guild, we were just tuned in. That was Alpha back in Antaurus. They were world 5th or something in that range.
Yeah.
But they were working on that phase at the same time that the world first guilds were, and so we didn't have a kill video. We just tuned into these streams and we were seeing them. Like we saw the Argus Mythic phase and everybody was just shocked by it. And I think that was probably a large part of what then pushed forward the goal, the will within the organizations to actually stream this thing. And that's really good that they did. Then
I think also
Old Year was method started, and from there it all blew up.
I don't remember what tier it was exactly, but I remember, I think it was Future Guild that was one of the first I guess streamers to properly show mythic raiding as a progression on Twitch, because I remember that many of their members had thousands of viewers, and this was before Method or any other like world first race was doing it, but they were still a very good guild. Maybe not world first, but maybe, I don't know, top 20 or top 30 or something in the world. And they were showing the progression, all the wiping and all the strategies and everything on Twitch. And while the world first race was going on, because as we know, it could take up to a week, maybe more, a lot of people were tuning into these guys because they were the furthest into the progression than anyone else on Twitch. And I think that also showed how much interest there is to actually watch mythic raiding while it's still fresh, while it's still a question mark of who is going to get world first. People are in those chats asking around like, okay, how far did that guild get? How far did that guild get? Oh, okay, today they're on this boss. They've been progressing this boss for this many hours. And that itself was also, I think, building a lot of hype. And I think
Future
a
is
tier
super
or two.
good at building hype. Like, just on their Twitter is hilarious.
They're great with the memes.
Yeah. Well, it's like what Ian was saying as well. Like, it can really help you learn a fight as well if you want to tune into a stream of a player that is, your spec. You can hear their commentary that's geared towards, if you play a mage and maybe you want to watch a mage stream and their point of view versus, a tank. So it's educational as in addition to just being, entertaining.
Oh yeah, for sure. And since then, it's developed a lot. It's really nice. There's so many eyes on this. Everybody's really excited. We see how the viewer numbers are increasing every single day until, that moment when it's getting really close to a kill. And I think, of course, Blizzard sees this as well. And it would, like you said, there is something magical or something cool about the feeling of having something secret come out of a mythic boss, right? Or the mythic last boss. So having more added to PTR wouldn't really be the right move, but maybe just more testing within. Maybe they just didn't have enough like private testing, or what would you call it, like in-house testing.
Yeah, they do have their QA team.
Maybe they just need more of that to make sure that these kind of things don't happen, especially because there is so much attention around it. It is something that has been going on for like a decade, as you said as well. It's not a new thing that it's suddenly buggy. It's not a question of, oh no, Blizzard got worse, that's why there's bugs. No, there's been bugs all the time. They've just been hidden. Normally people only follow Twitter to see like, oh look, this guild is now 9 out of 10, and then like they're waiting for the next tweet to announce when the next boss is dead, and now they're just watching it live and living through all the bugs and anything that they can find. So
So when Ian was talking about wanting to level up your communication, what were some things, Dratnos, you think would that Blizzard could do better to improve when Ian was like, oh yeah, we need to improve our communication, what are some things you think they could do to make that happen?
I think the main thing was there was a point in time where Blizzard saw that 25% shield go up and the gateway open, and they were like, "Oh, that's not supposed to happen. We need to fix this bug." At the time when they decided that was a bug that needed to get fixed, they should have also told everybody that that was what they were going to do, rather than just waiting for the guild to reach that point again and then be like, okay, is it bugged this time? Was it bugged last time? Because now we've seen, you know, two different things happen at 25%. What is supposed to happen? Are we even allowed to try and kill this boss here, or is this now a bugged fight? You know, there's a lot of confusion there. So I think the main thing, is if they identify like a fight breaking bug that they decide to fix or change, they need to tell us about it. And that's I don't think that there's that much else that they need to do. Like, I think it's good that they don't tell us too much about how the fight is supposed to end, but just tell us like, okay, the gateway was not supposed to happen. We're fixing that.
Yeah, I would also say that it was a good change they made to not change how the corruption, like Echoing Void, worked during progression.
Yeah.
So I felt like getting the heads up was good, but it also felt like a little psychological mind game. Like, you know, when is this going to get nerfed? How many more hours before this changes? And I think it was the right call not to change it during progression. So, you know, I think that was a good call on Blizzard's
completely forgotten about that.
as opposed to being like, oh, well, so maybe when they say improved communication, they will take the world first race more in mind before, you know, announcing some very large hotfix that could affect progression. And I'd also say, like, just the fact that Ian did this type of interview, I think is more of the communication they need in general. Just the idea that something happened, a lot of people are talking about it, and the game director is going to candidly, you know, talk about this one specialized topic for an hour, as opposed to, you know, the Q&As that are like, let's remind you what Azurite is, and, you know, let's tell you that, you know, Worgen have eyes again. Like, you know, I feel that this format works better in addressing one group's concerns versus a very broad video that addresses, you know, nobody's concerns in the community.
Yeah, I think it was great that this interview came in now. As you said, it's been a big topic of discussion, and it's great that it came in now after the Blackwing Lair hype as well. So there's still a lot of talks about World of Warcraft in general. So yeah, it was a good timing for it.
Yeah. So you have a podcast. Forgot to put this in the intro. You have a podcast, and it's the Titan Forge podcast. But now there's corruption in 8.3. So the main question I was going to say is that you know, Ian was talking about how corruption has played out as a replacement for Titan forging. What do you think of what he said? But as a side note, are you keeping? Is your podcast still called Titan Forging?
Okay, this is the biggest
now
piece
obsolete?
of news. He was talking about moving forward to a world without Warforged Titan Forging, and I just sitting here like, you know, I waited 15 years to start this podcast, and they just make the name invalid in 3 months.
Yeah.
Oh no.
It's really, really mean of Blizzard. It's the worst thing they've ever done. But I liked the corruption system as well. I think that there are some very big negative parts of the corruption system that are important and we can't forget about. Like the big problem is just acquisition of corruption gear. It's difficult to just get, you know, enough corruption that you can start making interesting choices with your corruption gear, and it's difficult to, you know, not just feel bad that you don't have Echoing Void or whatever the new Echoing Void is for your spec, you know, Twilight Devastation or Deadly Momentum or what have you, Mastery from all sources. There are some of those corruptions that are really good and good in a lot of situations, and the fact that you only get like 1 or 2 corruption items per week is a pretty serious feel bad if you don't get lucky in your first couple weeks with some good corrupted items. So I think that is a really big negative problem, and it's difficult to see past that. And for anybody who has run into that as their main problem with the system, I don't blame them not liking the system.
Yeah.
But past that, if they could have fixed that, if they could just make corrupted items drop more often, we have actually a pretty great system in terms of like deciding how much corruption to wear, deciding which between a couple of marginal corruption effects are the better ones to wear for a certain fight. I think those decisions are really interesting, and different players can come out with a different answer for a fight in a way that you really couldn't do with just, you know, a set of gear without corruption on it, right? You just sim it and wear whatever sims best, and there's not really any gameplay to that. So I really like the positives of corruption. I think that there are a lot of really good things about corruption, but there's just this huge negative in the way. It's the same with like essences. Like essences being so hard to acquire for alts just keeps them from being a good system as far as I'm concerned.
I liked how they just bumped the Oldhim and Rajani essences from Exalted to Revered right when people hit Revered. So it's like, oh, if you didn't give up on your reputations, oh look, with this hotfix, you can now buy these essences. But yeah, going back to that was a nice sort of unexpected thing that popped up. But yeah, so going back to corruption, I mean, I think it's good that Blizzard actually wanted to try something new, and we know it's only here for a patch, and it feels like a lot of there are things in later BFA are used as a testing ground for Shadowlands to see what works and what doesn't work. So hopefully they've gotten the feedback that corruption does solve some issues with, not just maybe not like automatically simming and equipping, but there's an acquisition issue, and maybe they can improve on that in whatever iteration pops up in early Shadowlands.
Yep. Honestly, I do feel like that was right on the nail there. The acquisition is the problem, because imagine if you kept getting corruption on everything, then you still have to make the decision of which items you want to use and what combinations, which ones you should cleanse, and etc. And I think that those are interesting questions, because obviously you can't wear everything corrupted, right? Which makes it different from Titan Forging. With Titan Forging, you want everything to be max Titan Forged, and if it's not, it doesn't feel like a good piece of loot. In today's way of gearing, if you have a mythic piece from raiding, which is meant to be your best in slot, it's not corrupted, it's fine, because this is your best in slot, right? But this just means that you have to work on your other pieces of gear, going up to the amount of corruption that you can handle, and that way you're building a character. So not every character will be identical, but it's a more realistic way to go for a best in slot kind of build, and I think that makes it really interesting. Acquisition.
They're different systems, but it reminds me of the growing pains with the Legion legendaries, how there were like lots of issues with tuning, and which were overpowered, and the acquisition of them, and eventually they worked out to being in a cool place where you could collect a lot of them, but you had to pick and choose, which to wear for different situations, and it was easier to get on alts. But I feel like there's a similar, I guess, learning curve with corruption. They tried something new, and there's some like very wow awesome moments, but if you are one of the people that's on the unlucky side, it feels like a pretty messed up system, because you can't play around with any of the intended cool features.
Yeah, so Legion legendaries, Azerite armor both have this exact same system, where the systemic launch problem, where they just launch it, and some people get the good ones and some people get the bad ones.
Right.
And everybody who gets the bad ones complains about it and feels really bad for a while. So it seems like they maybe can identify the next time they make a system like this that they should try and figure out what's going to happen if people get unlucky. How likely are people to get unlucky? How long will it take them to get good stuff? If it's 2 weeks, that's okay. But with corruption, there's kind of an infinite path ahead of you, especially with how hard it is to grind corrupted items. Like, they drop at such low rates from Mythic Plus that it's really difficult to end up reliably getting these good corruption effects. If you're not, especially if you're not.
I wonder if there could be more PTR testing. People cut out their sorry if I spoke over you. I was just saying that I wonder if they could incentivize PTR testing, because it feels that a lot of people, for obvious reasons, are not going to grind out stuff on the PTR. But if they could, maybe Blizzard would have a more accurate picture of someone playing for a few hours and being like, hey, this isn't fun, I didn't get anything, as opposed to the super dedicated people that will test every day and are more patient.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because I think you're right on PTR. People will go and test stuff, but the items are just there to be purchased, right? You can just buy whatever you want. So we never really test the system of like acquiring items over a period of time. And I think Blizzard likes to err on the side of giving us a longer grind rather than a shorter grind, because if they give us a longer grind, they can make it shorter and we won't complain. But if they give us a short grind, we all finish our grind within 1 month of the patch, and then it's Warlords of Draenor, where we all quit until the next expansion comes out. So they're right to be worried about that, but I think they're going a little bit too far in that direction. They need to make sure that everybody gets just give us some good corruption items in our first week, guaranteed. Start us off with some choice in their corruption items, our beginning pieces, and we're still going to need more good ones as the patch goes on, but just let us start with something good.
Like one good one. Yeah. And as you're increasing your cloak resistance, you want more anyways. So it's not like you're done for the season. And also you might get a piece of item which is better than that one, but no corruption. So maybe in the future you'd actually end up cleansing it as well. And that's another topic, the idea of cleansing. Do you think there should be an opposite way of it? So we can cleanse corruption, maybe a way to add corruption to an item.
Yes, there have been a lot of different suggestions for how to fix this acquisition problem with corruption, and one common one is let us add corruption to our items somehow. I do think that would help. I think it,
especially
it
when there's
fixes
a
the same
hotfix,
problem, right?
like when they're like, oh,
Yes.
was it two school of Oz? It's like, oh, it's now 700% versus 150, and everyone's like, oh,
So,
I just cleansed
the-
this. Oh well.
The first couple weeks, people would come into my Twitch chat and they would ask me, should I cleanse this item? And my answer was just always, don't cleanse it. Don't do it.
Yeah,
They
I'm
might
really
change
afraid
these
of
values,
cleansing.
You're gonna feel bad.
Yeah.
At this point, you're probably a little bit safer to cleanse a bad item or a bad corruption effect. But for those first few weeks, like there are people cleansing Void Ritual off of their pieces, and Void Ritual gets buffed by 100%. So yeah, should there be a system like cleanse? Should there be a way to reverse cleansing? I think they probably should make it reversible if they buff something by 100%. Yes.
Yeah.
I think that would be good. But also next time, next time people are going to get caught by this as well, right? Next time they do this, if it's not reversible, people are still going to get caught. But I'm going to just keep telling everybody, just don't ever take a one-way option in the first couple weeks of the patch.
Buy a bigger bag and save everything.
It's like, I'm going to have 5 wrists, 5 belts, 3 shoes.
Yep. I was also wanted to build off Annie's idea about the legendary cloak and the corrupted items. I mean, we've got this 2-hour-long quest line to get the legendary cloak, and maybe along the way there could have been more corruption items tied to different stages, or when you upgrade the legendary cloak to certain levels, maybe the quest line continues a little bit and it's like, oh look, you're rank 5 and this cool thing happened to your cloak and you've got this corruption item too, just like tack a few on to that whole like RP quest story. Or maybe because you've done the best horrific vision, you've gotten this awarded with more corruption, something like that, like a guaranteed piece.
Maybe the chest from horrific vision should be a guaranteed corruption, because there's still
be really strong for the once you can start doing the 4 and 5 mask clears and getting those
maybe
I didn't think about the mask.
Like the first it's like, oh, you finished this part of the quest line, you got your legendary cloak, okay, there's another quest to do this once, you'll get like a one-time special thing. Just sprinkle a few things in, so when the people that are unlucky at the start of the patch, at least they can have a few interesting pieces,
like one-time quests.
There are so many different ways that you could come to an endpoint of just people having more corrupted items in their bags. I think any of them would be good. That sounds like a good one too. Just increasing the drop rate from all sources would work for me as well.
I mean, the rank upgrades are quests one time, right? Like
yes,
upgrading your cloak, you're doing that quest once. So maybe in combination with that, there could be something as well.
Yeah.
The reason why I didn't think horrific vision 100% corrupted would be that crazy is because I'm just thinking there's so many different ranks of corruptions, and there's some different types of corruptions, and you're maybe already wearing something which has decent corruption. So that piece of gear from the horrific vision wouldn't necessarily be game breaking. It would give you a bit more choices, if anything. So that's why I didn't think it was that crazy, but maybe it would be too crazy. I don't know.
I don't think it would be crazy at all. It would make horrific visions really important to do as high as you could each week to just get more rolls at guaranteed corrupted pieces. But I don't think that would be a bad thing. I think horrific visions are fun.
I mean, a lot of feedback I see is people saying like, oh, horrific visions seem fun, but like, I feel limited, or I want to, do these even more. Or when they first were announced, people were like, oh, this is like the Mage Tower, but it doesn't seem as enticing. So by adding more cool stuff to it, I think that would be a good thing, because they are, fun.
Yeah,
fun
people
solo
like doing them
challenges, and
even
Blizzard was
with
trying to hype
nothing.
them up a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really exciting, actually. If Torghast is like horrific visions, but they got to spend all the dev time that they spent on Islands and Warfronts, this expansion on it, that would be such a great outcome, I think.
I mean, hopefully not Islands 2.0, but yes, I know.
Right, but Islands and Warfronts were just like the flagship features of this expansion.
Yeah, marquee features, lots of time in them. So I know what you mean. Like if they had like all the art that went into it and design polish. I think the system could be like even going into even more detail and be pretty engaging. So like
Yeah, I think
it was supposed to have like 10 different horrific visions or more rewards with them, or make it even more complex. Hopefully Torghast will be like that.
exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. We might laugh at Islands and Warfronts, but of course there is a lot of work that's put behind it.
And the art was fantastic for those too, right? Like the art team is just always knocking out all of their projects really effectively. It's just the rest of the islands were I don't know who they were designed for, but it's not anybody I know.
Remember when there was gonna be like PvP islands, and for one moment people were like, "Oh, we're gonna have like island tournaments, and we're gonna
there was like
and that's gonna be the new Twitch thing."
There was like an island
meta
invitational as well at Gamescom, I think, when they were previewing. Yeah. What a wild what a wild imagine just how shocked all the devs must have been when Islands came out and nobody was enjoying them.
Yeah, it's like, oh, instead of the Islands esports meta, we've got the Race to World First instead. That the runaway viewer watch thing on Twitch for BFA.
Maybe if we had spent some percentage of that island time on that last boss. No, but it is interesting how things plays out. It's really hard to know before you actually see it. It all comes together once all the millions of people play it.
On the show last week that like there were some end bosses like we talked about that look really cool, and it would have been awesome to to see the final phase of Gul'dan on Twitch, or Argus turning red, or Lich King Frostmourne. But it's like they knew that N'Zoth would be streamed, and it's like, come on, like can't N'Zoth be like pink or bright purple or something?
Exactly.
just to look
like
cool
just
on
change
Twitch
color, anything.
Yeah,
like Blizzard, every last mythic boss is now going to be on the front page of Twitch. Okay, you know this now. Okay, it's a fact. Make something cool happen. It doesn't even have to be cool deeply, but it has to look cool.
Yeah.
And everybody will be impressed.
They need to do that. Yeah, I think that they should make the mythic phases like more epic feeling than this one's was.
Yeah.
But this one actually was it was a really well-tuned boss fight. It's very rare for them to create a mythic end boss that doesn't need to go through several like nerfs during progression.
True. Yeah, that's a good
Ajara
point.
and Jaina all received just a bunch of changes while limited method were progressing on them. N'Zoth really did not. Like the health totals just stayed the same the whole way through. So and it was a really well-tuned burn.
I thought like it was, once the final phase was sorted out, I thought it was interesting where it was like, okay, we want some people to push to, temporarily go insane and get that damage boost. Like I thought that was sort of like you had to sort of give in to N'Zoth to defeat him.
Yeah.
I thought that was a cool twist. But just visually it's like, well, it's nice you had this interlude, but everyone is watching on Twitch, and this is, an old god that everyone has been, his build-up has been for decades, like, I don't know, just have like different colored lasers or something shoot out just to, everyone's like, oh, and the special N'Zoth phase, clip it and look how visually awesome it looks.
That's the thing. If something just looked really cool, that would be enough to clip it and be sent around to everyone. And then that's enough for somebody to be like, you know what? I haven't played that game for 5 years. I need to try it again. Like, this actually looks cool. It's like free advertisement. So it's great.
Yeah. As a side note, though, in spite of the difficulties which we've covered in this show, there have been bugs. This N'Zoth was not notably more buggy than other ones. Wowhead's coverage was up compared to all the other races. Like even the main summary post was like twice as much traffic as the Ashara one. So it definitely was pulling people in, which was awesome. I just think that it could have been even more epic visually. But something like we had to despawn N'Zoth in every region, like that got so much attention. That was
funny. I
feel, going back to the bugs, I feel like, so maybe N'Zoth didn't have a ton of bugs, but because Blizzard had to despawn N'Zoth everywhere, that got so much attention, and it sounded so dramatic. I don't think that's happened on other end bosses before, where the solution to the bug was to remove the boss for everyone.
Definitely not for the entire region. No.
Because I think I've seen or not seen, but I've heard for specific encounters for that guild, a GM has jumped in and despawned the boss right in front of them. But I've never heard of like everyone. And I wonder why that is. Is that because of today's tech? Like, why couldn't they just despawn it for them and nobody else?
I don't know. Whoever's job it was probably realized they had a very short amount of time before there was going to be the
Wasn't
boss
that
dying.
the night of the Super Bowl? Like, and I'm just picturing some intern being like, "Oh God!" Like everyone's getting like
an intern,
button, like erase all instances.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whoops! I meant to erase one, not all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's funny. It was a funny thing to have happen.
Yeah, that was funny, dude.
Yeah, so going back to, like you said, Ian was all, WoW is not an esport. Like, he wasn't saying that in a disparaging way. He was like, it's this very magical, unique event that brings people together, and it's different from esports, that everyone watches it for, 24 hours straight. It's not a structured, tournament. It's very different. And then it was like, how can Blizzard support these moving forward? And we went over the communication already, but the topic of the worldwide release was brought up.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think Ian, said they weren't going to do that, but it's very interesting because we just had Blackwing Lair come out in Classic, and they got a worldwide content release, including the instance, which, yes, it was cleared in 40 minutes. But, I know some people will be like, well, how come Blizzard can do this for Classic, but they won't do this for retail?
Yeah, I think that one factor is that if you release content 12 hours apart and it gets cleared in 2 weeks, that's not, it's not going to be hugely noticeable at the end of those 2 weeks. But if it gets cleared in 40 minutes and just, 400 guilds in North America have cleared Blackwing Lair before Europe gets a shot at it, there'd be a lot more complaining about it, right? Even though the people complain about the head start for North America, at least the two guilds are working on the boss at the same time, whereas that wouldn't be true for Classic. So I think that's part of why they do it for Classic the way they do.
And I think that we've also come off a string of some maybe undertuned instances. Like, Jaina lasted a long time in Dazara lore, but it did feel that the other bosses fell over very quickly. So it's like, NA got all these before Europe even woke up. So that felt undertuned. And then also, Emerald Nightmare, Xavius died extremely quickly. So that race felt a bit truncated as well. So I think when people see a lot of early bosses dying, or they remember things like Emerald Nightmare, the end boss, they're like, oh, well, like, what happens if the instance dies super quickly? Then what? Then the NA advantage is more pronounced. But I think that the pacing of ny'alotha was better than some of the other ones we've had. It wasn't just you wake up and everyone is 11 out of 12 the first day. So.
Yeah, I mean, if the first, all the bosses until the end boss are going to be cleared in the first few days, almost always. It's hard for them to make a difficult boss for limit and method earlier in the instance that will not be just a huge brick wall to everybody else. So I think it's going to be just normal that North America is going to get the world first all the way up to the end boss, and that's where the Europeans will have time to catch up, or the Asian guilds even. I do think it would be good for competitive integrity, and it would be a really fun race to watch if all the top guilds got it at the same time. But Ian made some good points about how, yes, that would be good for like the top end, and I personally think that that's really important as well because of the 200,000 viewers watching it too. And I think that should be something that Blizzard should prioritize more. But his point was that we actually need to focus on all of the mythic raiders in world top 100, world top 1,000 guilds that don't want to wake up at 7 p.m. their time to catch their weekly reset, and having weekly reset at a standardized global time would by necessity put it like right in the middle of a bunch of different time zones, raid times. Right. That'd be weird.
And there would still be issues too, like what happens if the reset is at 1 a.m. European time, then you have the European guilds competing, or like, well, in preparation for the race we had to redo our sleep schedule and start forcing ourselves to sleep during the day, and wake up at 11 p.m. to raid. And
it's not at all a problem for method or limit. That's not a problem. Like Limit did this for Eternal Palace. They played on American servers from London, so they had like a completely scuffed sleep schedule, and that they did that, and both guilds would be totally happy setting their sleep schedule to whatever they needed. The problem is the other 10,000 guilds that are going to be working on mythic difficulty.
But would the time affect those other people?
Yes.
Like,
the Asian guilds as well.
because if
It
they're not
depends on how you do
hardcore,
it.
if they're not hardcore enough to be fine with the sleep schedule change, like you said, like with method and limit, then are they hardcore enough where they have to raid as it's released, or could they just raid the next day anyways?
Even if they raid the next day, though, whatever hour you put the worldwide release on, it's going to be like 8 p.m. in some time zone, right? So if you're a guild that's in that time zone and your instance is resetting at 8 p.m. on Tuesday, like and your raid time normally is at 6 p.m. Now you just got to reset halfway through your raid hours. That would be really weird to deal with.
Yeah, it would be nice though if the Asian guilds could start. They have such a delayed start compared to NA and EU, and we were talking about how they sort of led the way in streaming during Legion, and one of the Asian guilds just got world 5th. There was a lot in the top 10, so it would be interesting, I think, if they could not have such a disadvantage with their time start.
Yeah, I think everybody would prefer it. Like all the people in the
Yeah.
top guilds would prefer it if there was a global release for this sort of thing. But I guess the decision Blizzard's making is that the world top 10 guilds are not as important as all the guilds below them on this one, and I disagree. But it's reasonable. It's a reasonable decision.
I don't know, I forget if Ian touched on this in the interview, but what are your thoughts on all the preparation that goes into it? And do you think that maybe turns viewers off from wanting to participate in mythic raiding themselves? Like, when it's okay, we're going to not raid today, we're going to, we need to spam islands leading up to the raid, or, we're progressing well, so we're going to go back and do a bunch of splits, things that can look very repetitive and boring and kind of a turn off to the average viewer that's like, I wanted to see the final boss, that aren't really related to skill per se, but more just insane grinding to get that extra edge of preparation. Because I feel like a tournament realm where everyone could start at the same time would get rid of a lot of this island spamming and prep, but then that also takes away something kind of fundamentally unique to the race.
Yeah, like the RPG element. But
Exactly.
it is interesting.
I think that tournament realms would be bad too. Like playing on tournament realm is just it's not as fun as playing on live servers. For it'd be good to not have to do all the islands and stuff, but Blizzard should just fix that by not making an island grind. Like that's how you fix that.
Yeah.
Historically, like the grindy elements of the RPG are fun parts. Like people play World of Warcraft because they're looking for a game that they can put that kind of time into and develop their character in a meaningful way. And I think that if the world first race got away from character development being important, that would be bad. Ian mentioned in the interview as well that like you just wouldn't see guilds gearing up characters in earlier boss fights, and I think I think that loot that drops in the earlier boss fights should matter, and you should have to if you want to bring a Shadow Priest that's geared on a certain later boss, you have to carry it through some earlier bosses, and that makes sense to me. So I think that the solution for Blizzard is just don't make a 1 week long island grind something that players can do for character power level. Like identify what the things are that
no more islands.
Yeah.
I think this was the island last hurrah, so that's a good thing.
Yeah.
True.
Whatever systems are in the game, Limit and Method are going to find something to grind for that first week. So just
of course.
make it something, make it
More
something
exciting.
fun like Torghast or whatever.
Yeah. So Ian also had some interesting and positive good things to say about the perspective of the 21st Raider, and you were casting for Limit, who kind of forged the way with that, having Max sort of be in the coach's seat, where he could just focus on doing calls and strategy and not also have to worry about moving out of bad things or keeping up a rotation and performing at a high level. And it was interesting how Ian was talking about his experience as a raid leader, and when you're raiding and you're raid leading, obviously some of your performance does suffer. So I thought it was interesting how, and I thought it was a good thing that Ian was being like, yeah, like this is totally cool. Like I was definitely a worse raider when I had to do raid leading, and this definitely solves the issue of the raid leader maybe not, pulling their weight performance wise. Do you think we're going to see more guilds adopting that strategy? Because I thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah, I think Method will do it. Like I think it was a good thing that Limit did. Okay, so like if we look back at Ajara, Limit loses Ajara by a handful of hours. Yeah. Limit wins at ny'alotha by 40 hours. So there's a big amount of time that they sped up from Ajara to N'Zoth. The 21st Raider thing is getting a lot of the credit for that, but there were a lot of things that changed for Limit this time compared to that time.
Yeah.
The whole guild was together in one place instead of just half the guild being together. It was almost all of them. They had external weak auras. They had external boss mods being developed for them by people outside of the raid. They had external strategy people that were just purely looking at the fight and thinking on like a high level strategically about what the guild is supposed to do to handle each of those boss encounters. They had food, really well handled, and hotels really well handled.
Yeah, the GameStop centers seemed super nice.
It was really nice. Yeah, it was futuristic. So many things were new for Limit, in addition to like 7 new people on their roster that were all extremely high performance players. So I think the 21st Raider thing is getting like 100% of the credit for, maybe not 100%, but it's getting a huge share of the credit for.
1 sec. Can you guys hear me? Because my cat just muted you guys. Wait.
Max,
can you guys hear me?
Over Limit stream, I mean.
No? Okay, I'm not sure what she pressed. Give me 1 second.
Rolls,
okay, guys, can you hear me?
Hey, yep, we can hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah. You were quiet for a bit, but we just heard you there.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Oh,
everything
my
good?
God. Give me a second.
Did your cat eat a wire?
Almost. Give me 1 second.
Okay, we'll keep talking about stuff. But yeah, I think that I think when people were like, "Oh, the 21st Raider strategy worked for them," it was because I think that it symbolizes how they put people in other roles besides just being in the raid, and gave those people time to focus on other important parts of the race. So I think that was overall an interesting strategy, and yeah, I think we would definitely see Method and other guilds have people that are really dedicated at something. Like maybe someone is an amazing strategist, but they really hate islands, and maybe they could just focus on that one role as opposed to trying to multitask. So
yeah, I do think we'll see this going forward as the a coach for Method and Limit and maybe Pieces, but probably not too far below that, because it's just hard to be an effective coach. And
right, well, it's also just
that kind
the
of
amount of resources as well. I mean, Limit is now picked up by Complexity, and the extra budget and support, it really makes it easier to have everyone in the same room and in a futuristic building and have budget to reimburse all these different types of talent than when you're just sort of volunteering and pulling the guild together on your own. So maybe who knows, maybe more esports organizations will want a WoW team now that people have seen that you can have many people doing Race to World First events and many popular streamers at the same time, and hopefully if esports orgs pick guilds up, then there can be more budget to sustain coaches or weak aura roles. But obviously it's very daunting for a guild without financial backing to have a dedicated paid weak auras person or a boss mods person or a coach, or all of these different things. So
yeah, it's tough as well. It's tough to get picked up by an esports organization without winning, and it's tough to win without getting picked up by an esports organization now. So it's going to be kind of this tough. It's going to be really hard for a new guild to kind of break into that Limit and Method tier, and Pieces as well. Pieces is trying to do it, but it's really hard for them by comparison. They're working with a lot less resources than Method and Limit.
Yeah, and it even trickles down to BOEs. I mean, like, BOEs are not the reason a guild wins, but, the amount of support you can have, from financial backing as well as fans being like, oh, here's a donation to your massive BOE fund. World 10th Guild may not have that level of, streamer support or financial backing to do that. And that trickles down to lots of things. Like when a popular streamer is, like, oh, do this split with me, viewers help me with the split. If you're not as popular, you don't have as many people helping you with your character's split. So it feels like the people at the top, once they're on a roll, can get a lot more resources and optimize, and the people in the middle might have a harder time catching up or bridging that gap with all the little extraneous planning they can do on the side.
Yep.
To get to world second or first.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's also part of why Limit is able to do so well now too. They since the streaming especially, we know that many of them met each other for the first time ever, even if they've been raiding forever. So we're seeing that difference for Limit right in front of our eyes, where they had less resources to now having a lot more, and how much better they're able to do because of that. Because being a world first raider is, to some extent, a full-time job around that time. You can't really do anything else. You can't just go to work and come back home and then race for world first.
Yeah.
Like, it's not really possible. I really apologize for what happened earlier. Basically, my cat managed to mute you guys, but when I was pressing the unmute button, it wasn't really working, and then she was kind of like not happy because I didn't want her touching my keyboard. But I think everything is fine now. But there was some parts of what you guys were talking about which was not heard. But
so like I was saying before the show that Dratnos, welcome to the show. We've got cats. They show up when we talk about serious things, and we're talking about how Limit was growing and the additional resources. The cat's like serious time.
Yep, exactly.
That's fine. I'm sure it wasn't that important. Yeah.
Well, if you feel like you're repeating yourself, feel free, because chances are that whatever you said wasn't actually heard. So go ahead.
Yeah. So this is something that we'll touch on probably a little later with the esports topic, but there used to be the raid exhibitions at BlizzCon, and then they kind of stopped. And then, the Warcraft Radio was asking if there would be maybe a raid spotlight at BlizzCon again, with the popularity of Race to World First. And Ian was sort of non-committal about it. And it's interesting because I feel like the rating stuff was really hype at BlizzCon at the start, like especially when they would do weird things in the encounter, like when they would just spawn extra bosses, exhibition matches, and then it got kind of routine and then kind of dull / boring, and then they sort of phased it out. But I think that it could be interesting if they did something as a raid exhibition with a twist, like if the guilds had to fight all the bosses at the same time, or just building upon that raiding momentum, because raiding definitely feels like it is in the spotlight again.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe watching two guilds race to farm ny'alotha would be boring, but I think it would be interesting if they did try to do something with raiding, rethinking the raid exhibition panel at BlizzCon. I think that it could be in their best interest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of cool ways that they could do something raid related at BlizzCon, but they're probably all a lot of work, and it's really difficult to, like, anytime you're doing like a 2-hour long exhibition, it's so difficult to capture the same feel that this 2-week event has in the Race World First, the wipes and the slow progression and tuning back in the next day and seeing them making 20% more progress on the boss. Like, those are all the characteristics of the Race World First that you wouldn't get in any kind of live event like that. So I don't know, some kind of cool, exciting raid exhibition would I think be popular, but they can't just like say, all right, because the Race to World First is popular, anything we do that's raid related will also be popular. Like, they need to
exactly.
Yeah.
So before we discuss like your role in the World First race, was there anything else from the interview with Ian that you thought stood out that we haven't touched on yet? Overall, I thought it was a great interview. Very candid and better than some of his other recent appearances.
I think he made a lot of good points. My favorite part was that when he was actually talking about how they design raid fights by, like, they go through all the bosses.
Yeah, and if no one wants to raise their hand, it's like, why are we designing this fight?
Yeah, I really like that. I think it's really cool to get a peek behind the curtain at how these boss fights are made.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they've done a pretty good job of making a lot of exciting, bosses in general. So I don't know. It was just a really good interview to listen to. I'd recommend everybody.
Yeah. Something I forgot that was important was asking about the cinematic at the end, which I don't know. We keep talking about the cinematic on every show, and I mean, Ian basically confirmed what we assumed they wanted to do, while sort of acknowledging it didn't really work. That the idea with the cinematic was that your character is in the spotlight and you feel a sense of like ownership and personal attachment when you see your character defeating Azoth versus Thrall with Deathwing. But you know, he sort of acknowledged that it didn't really land how they wanted it to, and you know, definitely taking that feedback in mind for the future. He did mention, which I thought it was a little unfair, how he's like, oh, you know, many people saw this for the first time as a half data mined cinematic, and I'm like, yeah, that was true. Like we did post it on Wowhead, but a lot of the feedback we got back in the day was, oh, that's it? Like, where are the lore characters? You know, like people weren't complaining that the background was funny looking. They were just like, why is my character firing the beam? They wanted to see more additional characters involved. And we have a lot more views on the final cinematic than we do the data mine one. So I would argue that there were a lot of people that didn't even know about the data mine version that just caught, you know, Squishy's world first stream or so the totally polished Wowhead video, and we're like, okay, like, you know, I want to see Ilaria and the Void Elves, or Sylvanas, or Mother and Magni doing something. Like, why is my character fighting a beam? I think that they'll learn that focusing the character is maybe not as epic as it appears on paper, but I don't think Wowhead posting the cinematic early drastically changed
People's
public
opinions.
opinion based on how many people saw that version versus the finished version. It's like a fraction of the people that were reacting to it.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I don't think it would have an effect like that either. I think a lot of people who watch data mine things are used to watching data mine things and are more likely to study what exactly is going on. And it's a completely different crowd. I wouldn't put the two together. What do you think, Dratnos, on this?
Yeah, I don't think you guys should be, you know, blamed for posting that kind of, like, that's what Wowhead does, right? Like,
I mean, if
you
Wowhead
guys
didn't,
weren't-
somebody else
weren't
would,
doing it,
right?
somebody else would be doing it, right?
Yeah.
So I think Blizzard should be making their decisions based on the idea that whatever we do is going to be on Wowhead as soon as it's, you know, as soon as it gets discovered. And if your cinematic for ending an expansion isn't cool when it's on a Wowhead video, then that's a problem. I think that what they should do if they want to go for us feeling like our characters are involved is just not have us lose control of our character, like, or, you know, have it not be like a cinematic, but just have it be like, you know, our character, while we are still controlling the camera, gets lifted up into the air and shoots the beam and is off, and then the cinematic starts. Like, I think that's the better way for them to accomplish the goal of making it feel like we are there.
True, that part didn't even have to be a cinematic. It could have just happened.
And going back to Twitch, even if there wasn't the data mining, I mean, there were thousands of people watching Squishy's world first N'Zoth. Like, it was like one of the second number 2 on Twitch. So a lot of people are watching Squishy or their favorite streamer defeat it, and they're experiencing the cinematic not through their character's eyes, but they're watching their favorite streamer and seeing their streamer on Twitch with the giant beam of light. So, like we're saying, you know, if everyone's watching the mythic boss, make sure he turns pink or purple or something unique. It's keep in mind that people may experience a cinematic just by watching whoever they like on Twitch, separate from data mine.
Look, I think one of the best ways they've ever ended an expansion was Lich King, and Lich King, like, the Lich King kills you and then does RP while you're there on the ground, and then, like, you know, everything is all these cinematic things are happening where Tyrion, like, shatters, you know, the Frostmourne, and but you're seeing that all while you are controlling the camera, and then you go and hit the Lich King for a bit, you kill him, and then the cinematic plays that's pre-rendered. And I think that that's the formula they should go back to. Next expansion is, you know, have us, whatever our characters are taking part in, have that be not
part
a
of the
cinematic,
gameplay.
have that be just happening in the game, in a world that we can still look around in, and then play the pre-rendered cinematic, and don't have any of these, like, halfway cinematics.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think it's good they wanted to experiment and try new things, because they've tried a lot of experimental things in BFA with narrative, and they've had very good cinematics as well as interesting nuanced stories like Jaina. But I think that N'Zoth may have been a tricky sell no matter what they did, because our characters did all these very questionable decisions throughout BFA. We can get the gift of N'Zoth, we can become N'Zoth's servant. In like War Assaults, we've sided with Sylvanas, we've done a lot of questionable things. We've freed Xalatath, brought the Blade of the Black Empire, accidentally freed N'Zoth. So it may feel like, oh, why is our character being considered a hero? There's all these loose story ends. And I know you're not the biggest lore person, but from a story perspective, it just felt a little too uncomplicated for all the disaster and destruction our characters caused leading up to patch 8.3 to suddenly be the hero of Azeroth, even though we're using Azerite to, blow many things up in early BFA.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my moral compass is very flexible. As soon as there's like a yellow exclamation point above somebody's head, I'm ready to just do whatever they tell me. It doesn't matter.
Yep. But yeah, so why don't we discuss the Race to World First and your role in it? I mean, we've been covering the World First show so much. Actually, last week's show, it was, I think, right after, one of the shows was right after it ended.
Yeah.
And we were about to go live, and I'm like, this is a really good kill, guys. Like, we should, like, can we just, like, delay the show 5 minutes, Annie? I think they're going to get World First. And we were right. So that was kind of funny timing there.
Yeah, like about to tweet. Wait, we might need to change the word of the tweet because I think this might be a kill. And she was right. It was a kill.
Yeah. So was this your first time casting an event like this? And what's sort of the prep that goes into it, especially when you're casting a boss like N'Zoth that has dozens, hundreds of wipes on it?
Yeah, so it was my first time doing anything like this. The prep was mostly just learning what the boss mechanics were, and then there's some just explaining some boss mechanics every pull, making sure that people are caught up with how the fight works and what's important going on in the fight, and then mostly just bantering with Tettles for the rest of the time. And that's kind of the job is if there's going to be 273 wipes on a boss, we can't have every single pull just be, and here you see the Basher tentacle. They need to go and attack this before it, the next one happens. If that happens, it's really dry.
Wonderful phase. Nobody died.
Yeah, so you need to balance, the two objectives, right? Like you want to be informative, talking about the fight, especially pointing out when something interesting and different happens, or if there's notable things. Like I would fixate on what percentage they could get the boss to on each of the burn phases, because that was a good way to compare each pull to a previous pull.
Less they have to do after when they get out of the chamber.
Mm-hmm.
And then the rest of the time is just talk about anything, keep it interesting, whatever the most interesting thing I could think about to talk about, which is usually not something related to the fight the rest of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Until the pull's over. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Talk about anything.
We were talking about the game Stop Center being really like futuristic. Like what were some of the unexpectedly interesting stuff that was there? Like I've never been to a place like that, so it seemed really cool though.
Okay, so yeah, we all had, everybody got like a top end computer, dramatically better than my computer here at home. Which is not a bad computer. Like I have a good computer here. I can stream and play WoW at pretty high settings, but they're just like massive computer, or not massive computers, but massively powerful computers. Laptops that are better than my desktop. So we all had these setups with all the players had multiple monitor setups, or Max even had like a 3-monitor setup, and they were in these rooms with just a ton of space, and whatever they needed for their own setup was all taken care of for them. Then there was the casting area, which was a full production with, there was a production room where there were people in there that were in charge of just doing the broadcast, and they were watching all the different. They had these screens with like 16 different feeds on them.
Yeah, I think I saw the tweet from Mariella. Like that was insane.
Yeah, yeah, she was in charge of all that. Then there was my favorite stuff was there was snacks all the time. Yeah,
were they healthy snacks? Were they like?
There was some healthy snacks. I was having the Sour Patch Kids just nonstop.
Wait, what is it called? Sour Patch Kids.
Sour Patch Kids. Yeah, I have a bag here now.
Oh, that's perfect.
I think it's like Swedish fish.
Yeah, they're very similar. They're very, very yummy.
Okay, nice. Sour sounds good.
Yeah,
we have different candy.
Yeah.
So I'm always very curious when people talk about candy, especially sour candy, because I love sour candy.
Then there was a coffee machine that was also like futuristic, where it was like a touch screen, and you'd put in like whatever you wanted, and you could set the strength of all the different stuff in there, and that was really good.
Mhm.
There was catering, lunch and dinner every day. There was really good food, and there was like this. So there's the player lounge area where you could just,
Right.
there was like a couch and bean bags that you could sit on and just
Yeah.
watch the stream on a big screen.
I saw a picture of that. It looked really cozy.
Yeah, so there was the beanbag gang, which was all the benched raiders at the end, and every couple hours, Max would go out to the player lounge area, and the beanbag gang would try and give him some idea for the fight, and he would always just say that they were really stupid.
And you guys had the pit.
Yeah, the pit was one of the areas where people were playing from.
Right.
Then there was the classroom. So it was actually like a classroom. There's these long desks and a projector touchscreen or a touchscreen wall where they had this software on it that had all of the different boss rooms on it, and you could put any of the boss rooms up and then drag around and draw on it with.
I saw a tweet
that's
with
so
that.
cool.
That looked really futuristic.
It was the kind of thing that I thought when I first saw that on the first day that we were at the site, I was like, okay, nobody's actually ever going to use this thing. This is not going to be useful. But in practice, it actually was. They were in there every lunch, and Max was like drawing up there and telling everybody where stuff was going to be on their next pull, and they were all eating.
That was shared, it was like a room that was a circle. I'm like, okay, that looks cool. They're moving us, they're moving us X around on this circle. Like, what? Obviously, I guess it's a very straightforward room. But when you actually are doing the fights, you see how the positioning is really important and how all the ad spawns was not just an empty circular room.
That's so cool. I want to see that screen.
Yeah.
Did you guys just hear a ping?
Yeah, that was my mom texting
me,
and my
checking.
laptop.
It's like, I don't see a cat, so I'm not sure what caused that.
Hi, Mom. Yeah, I'm doing Wowhead Weekly.
Hi, Perk Mom.
Yeah.
Nice.
But yeah, now that facility sounds amazing, and I'm sure that I wonder if more partner guilds could attend that in the future, because it just seems to be so nice to, again, just focus on raiding or your strategy role and not have to worry about,
there were actually
cooking food or mishaps or sleeping poorly or having a backache with a bad office chair. That sounds amazing.
There were two BDG raiders there. So that was cool. They had two people from that guild, but it would definitely be, I think it's every guild, if they can get themselves in a space like that, would be it's so huge. Of course, the resources required to do that are massive, but if whatever guilds are able to do that, it was such a big thing, I think, for Limit this time, to all be, especially just to be able to strategize and eat at the same time is not something you're normally able to do during Mythic Progression, right? Like, you take your 30-minute food break, and that's, everybody goes and eats, and then they come back to their computers and then talk. But if everybody goes and eats together, then you can do the strategy at the same time. And the Race to World First is all about optimizing your 24 hours each day. And these guys, the being in this space like this, really, it gave them so many extra hours. And that was kind of the whole Limit plan this time around was, how can we just get more effective hours in this raid? That was why they broke out the add-ons. That was why they broke out the weak aura guy, the strategy guys, the coaching role. All of those were taken away from the responsibilities of the 20 people in the raid, so that those 20 people in the raid could pull more often, and could just,
I mean, I think that's a better idea. Like, if you, I know there are people that are very passionate about one thing that are, maybe not like the very best player in the world, or they have taken a step back from one aspect of the game, but they are still really passionate about, the development angle of it. So it's really cool that now someone that's like, good at, like, for example, add-on management can just do that and shine, versus feeling like, oh, I have to raid, but also do add-ons on the side. And I think it reduces a lot of stress on the actual raiders too.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And anyone will perform better if they can focus entirely on the performance itself. So it's really good to delegate all of those kind of works to different people. So then you have the minds of more people working together, and everything just becomes so much more efficient.
Yeah, it looked like like everything that they could possibly have done efficiently this time around, they basically did, and it really paid off for them. So yeah, I think that everybody's going to be trying to emulate that going forward.
Yeah, I think they should definitely do like a behind-the-scenes tour of the facility.
Yeah, I was just thinking, I would have loved to watch a video on that.
That sounds really awesome. Like, strategize and eat at the same time. It's like, wow, like, please sign me up for that. I can work with you. But yeah, I think that's also a really neat success story, because Limit wasn't streaming at the start, and they were always coming in as number 2. And then they said maybe they would stream, but they wanted to focus on how to optimize before they would stream, because, you know, streaming the race then adds a lot of extra just like mental stuff you have to think about. You can't just focus on the race. And then they streamed Ashara and came in second, and then they optimized, and now they are partnered with this organization and have a really cool, beautiful building to stream in, and have given a lot of other people opportunities to, like you said, do add-ons or cast or weekors or strategize. And it's really cool to see that WoW went from having nobody stream to then Method paving the way, and now multiple guilds and then even partner guilds can travel to the facilities, and the community is growing. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah, the Limit's perspective on streaming initially was all focused on the negatives of being the first guild in the world. Since they were on the earlier reset, streaming was a much bigger disadvantage for them relative to the other guilds, because the other guilds would be learning more from watching the front runner at the start.
Right.
So that was it. Those are a lot of serious drawbacks for streaming, but by streaming, they then get to be picked up by Complexity and have everybody paid for to come to this event, and all of the benefits we talked about were made possible by the fact that we started
and then
streaming,
if you get to something first, you get the hype. Like, I think our most popular post on Wowhead for the entire month of January was ny'alotha despawning. So it's like,
that was cool.
if there's a bug, even you can still make it work to your advantage, because it generates hype. Like, people think that's funny.
Traffic.
They clip it. It makes people say, this crazy thing happened. Like, let me tune into the stream so a caster or a coach or a raider can explain this to me. And, you are the first to then see things like, secret phases or, any cool thing that happens after a boss. So now that the race isn't just, it's also a spectacle and entertainment, you get to discover and share a lot of cool things with those earlier, 12 or 18 hours or so.
Just a little side thing. I noticed that Max is actually here. Hello, Max.
Oh, hey!
And he says... Yes. And he says that there might be a wrap-up video, apparently, which might cover the in-house things that we haven't seen.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that'd be really cool. So send that our way if you would highlight it.
I am here to Pog.
I've seen a video of the facility. I don't know if there's one. They changed it a lot to set up the production for that. So I don't know if there's one after all that setup was done. But there is just like the GameStop Performance Center. If you search that, you can find there's like a 4-minute tour video.
Yeah, well, it's like what Ian was saying, how WoW isn't exactly like other esports, because there's just so many people and they're at it 24/7. So I think it would be cool to see the setup that you guys specifically had for the Race to World First, because it's different than here's a 2v2, or people go do this for 6 hours and they go away and do something else.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But it sounds like a gamer paradise, like luxury hotel. So
it really was. It was incredible.
Yeah.
It's so nice to be able to hear about all this with you being here too. I'm like so excited. It makes me feel like, I want to go and see that place. No, but that sounds really cool. I can imagine all the different custom, planning and everything of the whole facility for the World First race specifically as well. Like, I remember at Esports Arena, I think it was called, where I saw them, set up for a little event for the event, for the evening, which they would work on, potentially for some hours. And I can't imagine like how much they would have had to prepare for these boys to be able to be there and raid for all those days.
Yeah, the Complexity staff just through the entire process were all incredible, and they're like, it's an organization just of gamers all the way through. They're a lot of like Counter-Strike people, but they fully understand. It's not some group of people who don't really know what's going on. They all understood what was happening, and all of their goals were just to make the event as good as possible and to make sure that the players had whatever they needed. And with that kind of support, I could not imagine a better situation for Limit than to take that partnership. It seemed like it worked out so well for them, and even the culture of the Complexity people and the Limit people meshed really well, I'd say.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's really awesome that for your first kind of big casting event ever, you got to be part of this and had a really positive experience.
Mm-hmm.
Before I move on to the recent esports announcement that popped up a few hours before the show, any last thoughts, interesting observations on watching Limit in person? Like, was there a particular breakthrough where they, I don't know, like they found a strategy and it was really, you heard this like reaction from the room next door, or where there's, you know, obviously them getting the world first kill was probably a really cool moment to see in person.
Yeah.
But, any cool moments behind the scenes?
Our feed was like a second or two behind the actual kill or whatever. So just right before the boss died, you could just kind of hear in the background just this huge wave of noise coming from back in the build, and that happened on screen, and it was really, really cool to see. I don't know.
Did you interact with them a lot, or were you more like separated so you wouldn't distract their focus as they were, eating and strategizing and
so when the race was ongoing, for the most part, I tried to just stay out of their way. I didn't want to bother them. As after it was over, we were all kind of hanging out for the next 4 days.
Right.
And I have quite a few friends that are in the guild. So like Eric, who played mage for them. I did an MBI team with him before, so he and I are pretty good friends. THD is just in every Twitch chat all the time, 100% of the time.
He's the warlock,
he just
right?
lives on he's the warlock. Very very fun person. He ended up after they got the kill, he was just coming and watching me raid and giving me strategies for the bosses, which was really helpful. So I interact with them a lot, but not when the actual race was ongoing. I just tried my best to not I was there watching and doing all the stuff so that I could do as effective job of casting as possible, but did not want to bother them.
So you already had some friends even before the race among them.
I have a lot of there are quite a few people in the guild that are involved in various things that I've been involved in.
That's cool. That's
cool,
awesome. Yeah, and it all like ties together.
Some of the Wowhead writers were also part of it, like
Sang Helios.
Yeah, Sang is our Perfect Visions Islands writer. Zyronic does one of our Warlock guides. Tettles does a Balanced Druid guide, and you and Tettles did some of our 8.3 like DPS prep articles. So it was cool seeing some guide writers up on the stage and being like, "Yay, you got your deadlines done before you had this event."
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Such a cozy feeling, having all those friendships and just,
the whole guild as well. Like there's not really, I don't know. Some guilds are like this where there's cliques or groups of people in the guild that interact with each other and not really anybody else. At least among all the Limit people I saw, there are some that were really good friends with particular people, but they were just all.
Having everyone there just adds to the camaraderie. It's not like the clique of the people that are like cool enough or stream that get to go. And
it's a guild that has been. Like they lost badly. Well, not badly, but like publicly. Three of the last 4 races they were close and they lost. 2 of them they were really close and they lost in like heartbreaking fashion. So it's a guild that's been
NA versus EU, and like NA hasn't won since MOP, so are pretty strong.
Oh yeah, I heard those stats since 2012.
This is a guild that it was forged by that, right? They came out of all of that hardship stronger, and all the bonds between those people, like whatever happens in that race, those aren't going to get broken. They've already been tested. Whereas, so that even if they had lost here, I think that they would have still been all stuck together on it. And I think that was really how they were able to, like the guild it's just so resilient, right? They've bounced back from defeat so many times. They picked themselves up, and every time they just got a little bit better, and they figured out, the goal has always been to just get that world first, and everything that they need to do to get there has been, they keep getting sent back to the drawing board, and this time they put it all together. It's really, really great to see it. Just honored to have been there for it. Like that was
It
amazing.
sounds really nice.
It was really fun to cover on Wowhead's end, being like, oh, like a new thing happened. Like it was hilarious when like that morning we're like, oh, Limit has unlocked a new secret phase, and then 2 hours later it's like,
never mind.
Sent an email that there's no secret phase. We were having fun with all the coverage. It was pretty entertaining on our end, so that was cool. So if Twitch chat has more questions on the race or the Ian interview we didn't cover, drop them in chat and we will try to get to them later on in the show. But I think that we want to also discuss the recent Esports announcement, how it seems like there's not going to be grand finals at BlizzCon this year for stuff.
Oh,
But yeah, so we can talk about that and then also answer more questions if people have them.
I see a very important question before we go
Okay.
on. Can anyone explain this Dratnos
No,
eats people
man.
thing?
I don't know. It's somebody just at some point in the Limit Guild Discord, somebody was just like, they were talking about me for some reason. This was many months ago, and somebody's like, "That dude definitely eats people," and they just all laughed. And then Zyro started. He changed his Details nickname to that. It took a little while for us to see him on any Details meters, but when eventually we did, because he got a really lucky pull,
Random
then
savage
it became a meme in
shot.
Twitch chat. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So that's
Okay,
where the
so
meme
that's
came
the
from.
story. Gotcha.
Yeah.
So the story isn't just, it's true.
Yeah. I don't know what to say, man.
Tetsu needs to pre-screen these people. We're having, people that eat people on our show, and I didn't get a warning about this.
Yeah, Wowhead comes out as pro cannibalism.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
It's a bold corporate stance. We'll see how it works for them.
All right, now we can go on to less important things.
Okay, yeah. So this is the esports announcement.
Yeah, so if you're watching the show, you probably saw it, but if you didn't, around 3-4 hours ago, they announced the AWC and MDI changes for 2020, and one change which I sort of guessed that sort of was under the radar that I tried to hype up a bit. Well, I don't think hype is the right word. Blizzard announced a while back that Overwatch was moving from Twitch to YouTube, and I'm like, they didn't mention WoW in here, but I'm pretty sure WoW is affected. And they came out today in this blog and was like, yeah, we're all going to go to YouTube for 2020, and nothing will be on Twitch. And then they also made it seem that there's going to be a BFA final that's going to take place in the summer for both AWC and MDI. And because the BFA finale is earlier and there's no fall season, there was probably not going to be something at BlizzCon this year. Like there would be something at BlizzCon, but it wouldn't be the format we came to expect. And then afterwards, things would start up in Shadowlands again, with the hint that the finale would be in the summer again. So what do you think of the new rules? I know there was also some MDI regional changes. Do you think this is a good thing, and what sort of thing do you think they could actually do at BlizzCon if they are not going to have a season or year-long finale there?
Yeah, so we've seen MDI All-Stars, right? We saw that 2 BlizzCons ago. I think that kind of event is a pretty good thing to put at BlizzCon. I think that the way that MDI was handled at this most recent BlizzCon, they had like half of the matches off camera and not streamed.
Yeah,
anymore.
Oh, yeah, I remember.
So I think it might just be difficult for them to run a full tournament bracket at BlizzCon and also stream it all. So it makes sense to maybe just put some kind of exhibition match or All-Stars event or any kind of thing like that, building off of that that MDI All-Stars that I think was fairly successful and fairly fun to watch at that BlizzCon, and then leave the competitive events to their own, the full season culminating on its own schedule rather than in that very hectic BlizzCon window. So I think it makes sense.
Could you remind us how the what did you call the MDI All-Stars, how it planned out or how it worked out?
It was 4 invited teams.
Okay.
And they just played for they just showed up for that event and played in it.
I think it was
at
the
BlizzCon.
summer winners got to attend BlizzCon and then tried out some maps from the upcoming expansion. Okay. I think that's how it worked.
I remember now.
And they've done that. They do things like that with Hearthstone too. Like they have popular Hearthstone streamers come up and they announce expansion, and then they have the popular streamers play against each other using the new cards that the players can't see yet.
Gotcha.
I think it was right near the start of BFA as well. So I think I think the dungeons were out, but it was there was no infested MDI except for MDI All-Stars. I think that they just had that was the only MDI they did with infested, and then they started the regular seasons up in Reaping. But yeah, I don't think that this is inherently bad. I see there's a lot of kind of people saying that it being at BlizzCon is good, but I feel like BlizzCon puts such a tight constraint on how you can run your event, given there's just so much else going on. I think that it might be better for MDI to just be its own
Right,
thing.
and I think that Hearthstone has moved away from, the finale must be at BlizzCon. I mean, they have things year-round now, and they go to really cool locations for each, step of the tournament. So they always do something at BlizzCon, but it doesn't always align. And I mean, we don't know when Shadowlands is coming out. It could be very late 2020, and by keeping it open, it could be okay. Well, Shadowlands just came out. Here is this dungeon you might not have run. No, Shadowlands isn't even out at BlizzCon, and maybe it's like a Warlord situation where Shadowlands launches right after. So it's here's your first sneak peek at people being competitive in this instance, or trying new PvP Covenant talents on a tournament realm they haven't seen yet, and maybe that would hype people up for Shadowlands. So I see why they're not announcing that quite yet.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this MDI though. MDI with Awakens, like I think that Awakened is going to be an incredibly good format for like high level teams to bash against each other.
They didn't explain how they're handling corruption, right? I mean,
I don't think they've specified yet. No, I imagine that you'll probably just be able to get whatever pieces you want on the tournament realm. That's usually how it works.
Right.
Probably level 15 cloak and whatever corrupted items you want. It's going to be interesting to see what people do with that. I think they'll probably just play a bunch of Twilight Devastation and just have those beams zapping down packs. But maybe it's just the stat stuff on Unholy Death Knights. I don't know.
Hopefully, I don't know if they announced the full rules yet, but I know people were very hype about MDI and Legion, and then they're like, oh, in BFA it's more repetitive and it doesn't look as exciting. So hopefully season 4 will have more variety, or look more entertaining and just less repetitive in general. Hopefully they can change some stuff up for 2019.
And if Shadowlands, go ahead.
I agree. I think that it would be great if they can find a way for each of the cups to feel meaningfully different from each other. That I think would be a good goal.
Yeah, I was going to say, if Shadowlands is out right before BlizzCon, then what does that mean? That the final of the MDI would then be before that, or?
Yeah, well, the final of the MDI would be season 4 BFA. So that would happen in the summer in the in-person LAN event, and then there's just no fall winter season of MDI.
Gotcha.
And then at BlizzCon maybe they just show dungeons that are either coming very soon or just released, but there's no like Shadowlands season 1 MDI. It's just the launch of Shadowlands.
Yeah, I mean, I think we still just don't know. We don't know. There are a lot of different things that can happen in different orders at the end of this year. Like Shadowlands could come out as early as like August or as late as December, right? Somewhere in that range, and there could be an MDI on either side of that launch, or none at all at the end there. BlizzCon could happen on either side of the Shadowlands launch. I don't know. It's
Well, it's interesting as a side note about BlizzCon. If you look at the Anaheim Convention Center, there are a lot of events booked for November, which are at Blizzard, and the only openings are pretty early in October. And usually BlizzCon is later, first week of November. So that could also be a wrench, that if Shadowlands is maybe later than other expansions and BlizzCon is slightly earlier, then that also could be a wild card.
Is it actually fully booked in the first week of November?
Yeah. There are several conventions going on there. I think there's even a Magic convention going on.
Because I feel like it's always been in the first week, potentially second week, like early second week of November. I don't remember it being in October ever.
Like a very long time ago, it was in October.
Cool. Okay, that's interesting. That might definitely also have an impact on the decision on these. And I was thinking, because we're talking about MDI, but looking into the PvP as well. Obviously, I don't know exactly how formats and the cups and everything works perfectly, but the idea of having all the different previous games early on and then having a final at BlizzCon when potentially the expansion has changed, then that kind of changes everything, and then it might be weird for people who have qualified to continue in Shadowlands, and then maybe things have changed so much that the comps don't really work anymore.
Yeah, no one wants to see like a BFA arena if Shadowlands is
yeah.
out.
Yeah. Like no one will want to see PvP from BFA.
60.
Yeah, so maybe it also makes sense in that PvP sense too, to then have a sort of PvP all-stars instead for BlizzCon, and then keep the PvP tournament separate.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure Blizzard is deciding all of these timings, knowing when Shadowlands is going to come out, right? So they can make
Yeah.
sure that nothing too
Yeah.
weird
I'd
happens at
hope
that
they
launch.
know.
But I guess we're not 100% sure, right? It's possible
we
that
don't
something,
know when it's
especially like
coming out. Yeah.
if the expansion like gets delayed in a surprise way and that pushes
Oh,
it
yeah,
into
that's
the middle
true.
of one of these seasons or
Well,
something,
there's
I don't
just
know.
yeah, I mean, I think that they were very clear that things would happen in the summer for the BFA finals, and I don't think Shadowlands is coming in June or July. Sorry, guys.
I don't think so
You know,
either.
especially when they say, we'll release before December 31st. Normally, they put the final day of the quarter, so like December 31st or quarter four. Like if it was coming out in August, they would put the end of quarter three date in the press release like they did for Legion and BFA. So I'm pretty sure it's like October, November, December is when is what we're looking at.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like so the YouTube situation, I feel like that may be
Mm-hmm.
more controversial because it sort of slipped under the radar as Overwatch, League Moving, and the other Blizzard games. But obviously, World of Warcraft just cares about WoW, not Overwatch, and I've heard a lot of talk that it could be disrupting the ecosystem because if a streamer is participating and they're popular on Twitch, they might toss a host or tell their viewers to watch this other Twitch channel. You could get Twitch alerts. For Warcraft, there have been Twitch drops where if you watch long enough, you get rewarded. They do that with Overwatch, but I believe they've even done that with WoW. And there are Twitch extensions, which were really awesome during the World First Race. And it just seems like they I don't think the YouTube decision was made with WoW in mind at all, but WoW's coming along for the ride, and I think it might cause some interesting difficulties along the way. I mean, I'm sure they have the technology to make YouTube esports better than it currently is, but there's just a lot of like little subtle things as far as community and getting fans of a streamer to swap platforms to watch them that might be a drawback.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, of course there's a huge upheaval here.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, everybody who goes to YouTube, everybody, if you want to watch MDI VODs, you usually go to YouTube, right?
Yeah.
So there's maybe some portion of people who don't really use Twitch and who do watch Warcraft content on YouTube that are now going to see it, who otherwise wouldn't have. I think in general, yeah, it's there's definitely a worry that this could leave just people not being aware of the MDI happening at all. People who would watch it if they saw Warcraft live on Twitch, but who aren't going to like seek out the MDI. So I think Blizzard needs to make sure that they like push the they make sure that people know that this is happening and it's live.
Right. Well, also Twitch hosts, like someone could finish streaming and then roll over all their viewers to the official Blizzard event out of goodwill, and it feels, you can tell people, I guess, but it's different than an auto host, and it also is a bit weird to be like, check out this rival platform. Like, is that even part of the terms of service? Like, can you tell?
Yeah,
can you
as a Twitch partner of what am I actually allowed to do about the MDI on YouTube? I'm not 100% sure.
I mean, you could definitely talk about it, but there's no way of directly sending people. Because for that, you'd need a host or something, and people don't really bother to change platform. If you go offline, they tend to go to the next streamer on their following list.
Right.
I think another point with this is that streaming WoW in particular, is so small on YouTube. Like, people don't really stream WoW on YouTube. Most people stream on Twitch. So if any of those kind of tournaments would bring any viewership to WoW streaming, it's kind of wasted on YouTube because no one there is going to watch.
Does YouTube even have clips? Because, I mean, we're talking about the World First Race, how important clips were in generating hype and highlights. And I don't
think you
know.
just link timestamps in the videos.
Is it timestamps?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's just different than being like, check out this 10-second funny thing that happened.
Yeah. Twitch is definitely more streaming orientated, and YouTube is definitely better for actual VODs, actual videos that people can go back to and watch. But the streaming part of it feels like a bit of a waste to have on YouTube. I don't think it would lead to more viewership for WoW in general in a streaming sense, at least. And I'm not really sure how.
I also feel
also
that
the players themselves, like if the people who are
Okay,
in
sorry.
these competitions, sorry, there's like a slight delay, so we're talking on top of each other sometimes. But the people who are on these tournaments, MDI or AWC, they're more likely, I think, to be looked up if they're on the same platform streaming. And since nobody's streaming on YouTube, it's very, very unlikely for anyone to tune into any of the players. And I think it's good for the health of WoW to have that kind of connection. People from watching tournament goes and finds these players, maybe keeps watching them because they like them, and then they keep up with the next tournament even more. It's like a circle, like a life circle for WoW itself, keeping just being healthy and up there. But now it kind of feels like it's going to be streamed on on YouTube, and then it just kind of crumbles away.
Right. I'd also be concerned about sponsorships and visibility. This was an issue when a bunch of the matches weren't streamed at all for BlizzCon. You know, sponsors think that they're going to get a certain amount of airtime. People think that they'll be live on Twitch and, deepening their brand, fan connections, and they weren't streamed at all. And now if somebody has to be online in this tournament, but they're not on their main platform, that affects their metrics, engagement, how many hours, there are, sponsored things in the background. It's just an interesting wrinkle when people have to split their time and talent between platforms in a way they haven't had to before.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like YouTube is like a little known thing that you're not, it's
Right.
it's possible to get sponsors to be interested in supporting stuff on YouTube. So hopefully they're able to do that. But definitely there's a lot of effort that's going to be required from Blizzard to make sure that this isn't a big negative thing. Like they need to do a lot of work to keep it good for the players and everybody involved.
And Twitch extensions, the extensions for both events were really cool, between having the boss abilities showing, all sorts of guilds with progression. I think Limit had the game you could play to raise money for charity. And I don't think YouTube has any of that. And it's very helpful for MDI and AWC to know the specs people are easily, what trinkets they have, what Azerite or corruption they have. I think all that is really important. And I mean, I know that YouTube sees this as an opportunity to develop their esports more than before. So maybe they'll make some custom extensions, but right now I am not aware of extensions on YouTube, and I thought that was a very important part of all WoW, esport, and Race to World First events.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I think extensions and hosting and a lot of all those other things, which are very
Emotes?
Emotes too. I mean, they have their own emotes, I guess. But there's a lot of things that are very Twitch
but
culture
they don't
like.
transfer over.
No,
if
not the
you
same
have
ones.
a team emote on Twitch, then do you have to buy the team emote on YouTube? Does that team even have a
That's
YouTube
a very
channel?
good point.
Yeah.
When you're watching
so-
teams and people spam the emotes of the people who are competing, that would not be possible anymore on YouTube, because surely those people are not partnered on YouTube as well. That's impossible.
That'd be a violation, yeah.
Yeah, that would be a violation.
Hopefully the YouTube Blizzard deal includes everybody watching this stream gets access to an emote of each team's logo while they're in that stream too. Like that kind of thing is something that Blizzard and YouTube have a big deal going, right?
Yeah.
So with that amount of cooperation, they definitely have the power to make this still good, but yeah, it's not going to work by default. They are both going to have to, both YouTube and Blizzard are going to have to
I just hope
do stuff.
they give it some love, because in the initial announcement, they didn't even mention WoW. It just was, Overwatch, Call of Duty. So I just want to make sure that they are, the higher ups, that they are making features that support WoW, even if they may not be as useful for Overwatch.
Mm-hmm. I'm also really curious on how the viewership will be. What do you guys think? In comparison to
Twitch, is always
Twitch.
tricky, because there's the whole controversy surrounding autoplay, and I know Twitch has this issue too. A major corporation will buy out a bunch of ads on a website, and they'll have the Twitch stream autoplay, and they'll be like record numbers. So it tends to inflate things. I don't think that really happens with the Race to World First. I think sometimes the launcher autoplays or gets very trigger happy, and it quickly you can click by accident and it starts playing. So maybe I don't think there's as much inflation going on, but there might be a little viewer inflation. And I don't know if YouTube would have a similar thing where, I don't know, like maybe when you open up YouTube, you've got the Blizzard thing just blaring in your face no matter what it is, if that could affect viewership. But I think that organically, like as to actual people, I think it's going to be tough at first getting people to convert and set up notifications. I mean, maybe if they're like, watch YouTube and get a mount when you connect your YouTube to Battle.net or something.
Yeah.
Maybe that would get people to take the first step. But I think it's going to be rough for organic getting the Twitch people to swap over.
Yeah, I mean, YouTube gaming is it's a smaller, there's less people on that than there are on Twitch, right? Which is a negative
Especially
at first. It does mean though that YouTube, like if they advertise MDI and AWC hard on their platform, which they could do, right? They could ship a lot of new viewers as well to both those tournaments if that was a priority for them. But again, it all depends on what exactly YouTube and Blizzard are willing to do here. Like if they just start streaming on YouTube, it'll be a lot worse than it was on Twitch. But if they, if they do a bunch of work, it can definitely be still as good or better.
Yeah, I mean, because YouTube is a huge platform, right? It's more the streaming aspect than World of Warcraft specifically, because of course they do have some big streamers there too, but I don't think there's many World of Warcraft streamers at all. There's some maybe who already have a World of Warcraft following from doing YouTube videos that might stream on there, but mostly you find most World of Warcraft streamers on Twitch. So naturally, the place people would look for WoW streams is on Twitch. But YouTube is a huge platform. So yes, if they use the right resources in the right ways, it could bring in a lot of people. But those people may not necessarily transfer over to Twitch either, because they might be people who, just tend to watch YouTube.
I mean, YouTube they're not gonna spend this kind of money without it being,
not paid by Blizzard.
Seeing like they're gonna get something out of it, right? So
yes, of course.
They've got to have a goal that includes, all right, we are now going to get, like, we are trying to bring streaming to YouTube, right, from Twitch. So this is part of that plan, right? And we have to see how well it works out for them. But if it works really well, then we might all be in YouTube in some amount of years. But if that doesn't happen, then this will not, it'll be less viewership, and that would be, I guess, a shame.
I mean, fortunately, we do have, Race to World First. I know Method was doing Method Mayhem, some PvP things, so there will still be an event presence on Twitch.
Maybe that's also why Blizzard thought they might as well. Like, they have these events on Twitch where they're getting the viewer numbers. Why not build on YouTube?
I think Blizzard just was like, Overwatch, Call of Duty. I don't know if they cared about WoW. But,
yeah, that's true.
Yeah. That's true. It's sad to say. I feel like they should.
WoW is the smaller baby.
A big role.
Yeah. WoW is not a big girl yet.
But yeah, when you were just saying something was also big news, Dratnos. What was you referring to? Is that
Method? Yeah, Method going 24/7 on their Twitch. That's going to be fun to see how that plays out. Yeah, so they've got the 5v5 tournament coming up this weekend.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Oh, 5v5 tournament. How is that going to work?
You're going to have 5 people on your team, and they're going to have 5 people on their team, and whichever team survives is going to win, I guess.
Like PvP?
Yeah, cool. Like 5v5 arenas again.
Yeah,
I'm not really sure what the format is like, but their Twitch stream has gone 24/7 now, so there'll always be something happening.
They announced that at the end of the Race to World First that they're going to they hired several managers as well to manage the content, so you will have like structured tournaments or like structured podcasts on it, so it's not just going to be like, oh, let's rerun N'Alotha for the next year. It will be scheduled, like curated, interesting content on their main channel, which I think that's innovative. They're always like very good at innovating WoW entertainment. So and the tournament this week, I believe, does have a prize pool, which sort of is bringing me to the next topic of Blizzard announced the prize pools, and they didn't talk about any toy or crowdfunding this time after the fiasco of 2019.
Yeah.
Not surprising, right? Not surprising that they're gonna stay away from that for now. Yeah, I don't think these are bad prize pools either. Like $300,000 for this is just the BFA finals land, right? It's $300,000, and then the cups themselves. Yeah. I think that's not a bad payout here for a half year long season.
Do you think that it makes sense that Arena is more than MDI?
So the finals of the arena are higher prize pools, right? But
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
500.
We don't actually know what the cups prizing are for MDI, right? Like what those are like.
Let me pull it. Let me just grabbing this quickly in the Wowhead post. So let's see.
Like we know that the BFA finals for AWC has a higher prize pool than the BFA finals for
Right,
MDI.
and we
But
also
we don't actually know what the total prize pool is for both of them, right? Because we don't know.
We sort of know Arena.
Arena is $10,000 per cup.
Yeah, we don't know MDI.
So yeah, the MDI, if each MDI cup has a higher reward associated with it, I guess I couldn't really see it being that much higher than $10,000 per cup. So yeah, it's probably going to be higher pricing for the AWC than for the MDI.
Right.
I don't think they have to be the same pricing, right? Like I think it's fine to have one be worth more than the other. Yeah, I'd be interested to know why they chose for AWC to be worth more as well.
It's
just
500,000 prize pool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, for the finals of the AWC. Yeah.
And the 10,000 per cup is separate.
Yes. Yeah.
Gotcha.
And there's the 8 cups. I'm holding up 10 figures as I say 8. There are 8 cups leading up to it. Yeah.
Yeah. Either way,
Gotcha.
it's like these are pretty substantial
money.
prize pools for half of the, like this isn't the BlizzCon prize pools that we saw, right? Like these are smaller numbers than the BlizzCon prizes, but that was like end of year versus not the halfway point. So
they also may want to sweeten the pot, knowing that people have these concerns that their branding and engagement metrics on Twitch could take a hit, or less people could be watching them on YouTube. And it's like, well, why should I do this end of BFA thing when I could be doing Shadowlands stuff? So maybe this will encourage some people in the middle on the fence to try it out, or I don't know. Maybe I know there's always a rep that more money should be given to WoW esports, so maybe it's still not enough. But I don't know. Maybe they're trying to be more generous than in the past, even if it's not enough, just because they're worried about the YouTube transition scaring some people away.
It actually says here that the AWC prize pool is the largest to date. So
pretty cool, yeah.
Yeah,
so that means
it's
with
all the money the toys raised last
year.
Yeah. They had a budget.
It better be higher. It was supposed to be last time. No, but that's good to see at least, and it's going to be interesting to see if the MDI is going to get more, or if that's if the 300k is going to be the final numbers.
Yeah, they also, I believe they talked about the MDI having the in-person LAN, and they didn't mention anything similar for Arena, so I don't know if they're like, oh, well, it's less, but there's this immersive in-person experience that MDI gets that's unique. I don't know.
Yeah, that makes sense. Maybe they have the same total budget, but more of it has to go to those costs in MDI than it does for AWS.
Yeah, I could see that being the reason why. Of course, because it's WoW, people like knowing as many specifics as possible, because if you don't fill in the blank, people will fill it in the most cynical, negative way. So
yeah, everybody's always the most cynical, except for when they are predicting what the last 25% of a boss fight's going to be.
Then it's like, oh,
and they're like, yeah,
best cinematic ever will appear.
Yeah, there are going to be 3 more Magni phases, and we're going to see all these different things, and their imaginations just run wild. But when there's unknown information about a prize pool, it's $0. Yeah.
Yep. So yeah. But yeah, that's about it for the announcements. We don't know a ton of details besides that. I think MDI starts April 11th, the day before my birthday, so that's cool.
Cool.
And yeah, I think that we've been talking about esports for 2 hours. We should probably talk about Classic a little bit and our lore segment, because sorry guys, it was actually popular on Wowhead. But why don't we read off some recent subs, and then we can talk about these WoW books and Classic stuff, because I know some people on Wowhead actually were really interested in our coverage on that this week.
For sure, yes. We have an 11-month resub from Steven RS. These subs were a while ago. Hopefully you're still here so you can hear us say thank you. So thank you very much for supporting Wowhead.
I'll poke him in chat. He's our data mining guy. So,
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
He
That's
better be
almost a whole
watching.
year, so thank you.
Yeah.
And then we also got a gifted sub to Max from Aegis. So Aegis, thank you very much for the gifted sub. And Max, feel free to use and abuse all emotes.
Yeah, and thanks for joining the stream. I know you tweeted it
Yeah,
out.
indeed. Thank you for
Hopefully you'll do
joining.
that, wrap-up video.
Yes, I'm waiting for that wrap-up video. I want to see all the behind-the-scenes stuff.
Yeah.
And yeah, so these WoW books.
Yeah, so 2 books were announced last week. And some people are excited about the books for the lore, and other people are excited because it's more hints moving away from ny'alotha and more towards Shadowlands. So the first book is a prequel to Shadowlands called Shadows Rising, and it will discuss what happens next for the Alliance and Horde. For example, Anduin's gonna send Ilaria to hunt down Sylvanas, and it's like, oh, that was cool. We wondered why she did nothing in 8.3. I'm glad she's getting some action. And on the Horde side, there are a lot of different things, like Talanji makes a reappearance, and we've wondered what she was up to, what she thinks of the peace treaty. Surprise, she's not very happy because the Alliance killed her father.
Yeah.
There's an assassination attempt on her, and then she and Zappy Boy go off to save Bwonsamdi as Sylvanas tells Nathanos and Sierra Moonwarden to kill Bwonsamdi. I guess he's a threat to the jailer. And people, the novel is coming out. Why didn't I put this in the notes? The novel is coming out on July 14th, which is a month later than the similar novel Before the Storm, the BFA pre-patch novel. So of course people want to speculate, when would we be getting a Shadowlands pre-patch as a result of this? If it's a month later, does it mean that Shadowlands is then like September, October versus August, and so on? So with the knowledge, this is July 14th, and I think Blizzard said that the Shadowlands pre-patch would be larger than in the past. What do you think this means for the scheduling of Shadowlands?
Do you want to comment this, Dratnos, or would you?
Sure. So I guess the default assumption, if you're assuming the 2-month gap, is then that this would be September, September 16th or something. Would be the release date. I know September's kind of a weird time to release a game. It feels like you should do it in the summer,
it's
or
like
save
back
it till
to school.
Yeah.
You missed the Labor Day.
Yeah.
So I maybe the better assumption is actually just that the 2-month gap is not going to be the same this time. Like maybe it'll be longer or shorter this time. One thing,
I feel like
I don't know really if there's all that much we could take away from this, except for the expansion will probably not be out until at the earliest July 14th, right?
Right.
Yeah, or September 16th.
Also, another question: do you or Tettles know any of the characters I was talking about in the summary? Were any of these characters new names?
I knew them all. I've got them all in my head.
Nice.
Feel free to quiz me. I prepared my lore expertise for this.
Yeah, we need to get Dratnos and Tettles on show sometime and do a quiz.
Yeah, I remember asking Tettles, was like, who is Jaina? Why are we fighting her in the Star Wars?
Yep, that was funny. Yeah, Tettles versus Dratnos, lore off. Sounds great.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It'd be like me and Novel, it's like me and me and Dratnos, and then like Novel and Tettles. We'll see which.
Oh yeah, well that way then both teams do have an expert, so that could work.
Yeah.
That could work. Maybe you guys are only helplines though. They can't always rely on you guys, but they could be like, okay, I want Perk to pinch in for this one.
But yeah, so as someone that is I'm really into the lore. Our past guest last month was Novel. We do these monthly lore collaborations, so I really care about story. But it's interesting to hear, as someone that doesn't care about the lore, do you care that there are possibly major plot points happening in a book and not in game? Would you find it interesting if some of that stuff was covered via a quest, or do you not really care as much?
Yeah, so I wouldn't describe myself as somebody who doesn't care about the lore. Like people like Tettles or a lot of high-end raiders, they actively don't care about the lore at all. Like they don't the game tells you the story and they don't listen.
Yeah.
I pick up the story from when the game tells it to me, right?
Yeah.
Like when there's cutscenes or dialogue, like I'll listen to that and I know quite a bit about the lore from that. And I've read some of the books as well, like some of the earlier ones, like the Wrath of the Lich King book. So I know some of the lore stuff, but I didn't read the BFA book. I probably won't read the Shadowlands book. Maybe I will, but I don't mind if there's story that happens in the books that I don't see in the game. But yeah, the main way I engage with the lore is when the game tells me it, basically.
Like when you saw Callie Amenethil show up in BFA with her new, white alabaster lady model, like, were you confused? Or you're like, oh, like, that's cool. Like, why is she back? Because her whole transformation and death and rebirth took place in the book, and that explains her new, light-touched undead model and why she's helping the undead. Like, was that confusing when you just saw the little follow-up quest to have her go to Undercity, or were you just like, okay, I guess I missed something?
Yeah, I don't even remember that, so...
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, I think a lot of things, if you don't know that something happened in the book, then you don't really know that you've missed it, so you don't really think about it. Like, especially if you're not into the lore in all the details in the first place, then I think you miss a lot of things and you don't mind it because, well, you didn't know about it in the first place. I
will say, though, that when they did put something in a book and in Quest, it was still difficult because the whole War of the Thorns pre-patch event played out super differently in the books. And everyone's like, where's Tyrande? Like, why isn't she helping the Night Elves? And Sourfang attacking Malfurion looked very not epic using the game animations. But in the book, you learn a lot more about all the important things Tyrande was doing behind the scenes and how Sourfang attacking Malfurion and then Tyrande holding him in place and Elun's light being all part of that. Like, it was there was a lot of details that didn't make it into the game, and it's hard to want the game to have it in more detail because it's only a quest that you can do for 3 weeks. Like, how many resources should they put into this very temporary content? So it's a tricky situation to be in, trying to tell a complex story and putting things in the game that are, satisfying, that don't have people be totally confused.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I don't blame them for coming out with like slightly different canon from the books versus an in-game quest line, right? Like it's kind of unavoidable given the two different pipelines that the content gets produced through.
It is interesting to see those things, though, the differences.
Yeah, I hope the Shadowlands story is... I don't know. There were a lot of, I think, valid criticisms of the BFA story being very similar to the Mist storyline. So I think it'll be cool to have us moving into a new world that I think is pretty resonant with a lot of people already. Like an afterlife world.
I think it's really cool
about Bolvar and seeing popular characters like Uther
who are we gonna see?
Yeah,
I'm actually really excited for Shadowlands. I think it's going to be really cool. And speaking of Shadowlands as well, with the pre-patch that you touched upon, Perk, I think because of the huge deal of level squish, I think it kind of does make sense of a little bit of a longer pre-patch, because I think it's going to be a so like just purely gameplay wise, I think it's going to be a big deal to come back to that, and maybe it'll need some adjusting,
iron out all the bugs, so we don't see the bugs on Shadowlands launch streams or as many bugs,
and figure out how old things will be handled as well, something that might not affect that many people. But for me, going back and wanting old transmogs, knowing that I need to be exactly level 90 to queue a heroic scenario in MOP, what's going to happen then? Am I going to be level 37 exactly, or are the level limitations going to be a bit more loosened? How is that going to work? I feel like there's a lot of things that will come out because of this level squish that needs to be looked at. So I think having a bit of a longer pre-patch makes sense in that way. And of course, we do also have the interesting storylines around Savannas that we had the entire expansion, which is leading into Shadowlands. So I think there's going to be more in terms of lore as well to maybe discover or explore a little bit before Shadowlands is properly out.
Yeah. And going back to the lore quickly, I think we'll discuss this book probably in more detail when Novel is on the show again. But Blizzard also announced that there is it sort of seems like a cross between a like historical document and concept art book. Um, that's World of Warcraft exploring Azeroth, the Eastern Kingdoms, and it just focuses on interesting items and zones and history with lots of art just on that one continent. And I think that could be interesting as the first book in a series, kind of like a chronicle series where you could apply that to any continent as opposed to being locked by an expansion. So you could have, a book on Outlands, a book on Northrend, a book on Argus, a book on Shadowlands, where you take a few characters that are popular to that continent and you have them go around the world and do exploring. I know people were really sad BFA didn't have a dedicated art book. So if these books have a big emphasis on art, this could be a way for more people to still get that, collect their really pretty art books outside of a collector's edition.
Yeah, definitely. I
We
think
discussed-
Shadowlands has a lot of
yeah.
potential for amazing art. Just by
Yeah,
looking at the
and,
cinematic. Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, people. I just was going to say that there is a lot of lore implications with this that I covered in an article with Novel on Sunday that probably is not the best to discuss with Dratnos. Probably say that when Novel is back, but you can check out the collab and we go to get into it in more detail. But yeah, I agree. Shadowlands with the Four Covenants. I think people would love concept art
Yes.
because they're all so different.
Because
Yeah,
people have like favorites and different things that they might like in different moods. I just had my cat touch my foot and it kind of scared me for a second. I was like, what's that?
Right, Paul, where are you? He ran away.
Yeah, so I think art for Shadowlands will be pretty amazing. And it kind of also brings us back to the decision of keeping the Zoth corruption based on only Uldum or mostly Uldum and Veil of Eternal Blossoms, which leaves more space for more art and work put onto the zones for Shadowlands, potentially. Which also leads to more reasons to have art made, for outside of the game in its own book of some sort. I think I think we're gonna see a lot of really cool zones.
Yeah. So we should discuss the big WoW Classic content drop that happened yesterday. We discussed this a little in the context of global release times for the World First Race, but we've got Sunken Temple quests, a bunch of important reputation items like more powerful enchants, the Nightfall weapon that has a really good spell vulnerability debuff. The Darkmoon Fair is running. You can get your trinkets and sage fortunes now, and most importantly, Blackwing Lair opened and then was defeated in 42 minutes.
Yeah.
It's so weird because I mean I've always been a rogue, and Blackwing Lair memories of my guild. Trying to get extra DPS on Veil, and then being one of the rogues that had to deal with the suppression room, and oh no, someone messed up, and now I'm pulled out of stealth, and I'm slowly trying to get to the next trap. It's just weird. I mean, I know obviously things are very different now, but it's just jarring.
Yeah, nah,
like,
I can imagine.
Yeah.
And apparently the world's second was like a minute later.
It was the same second.
Was it the same second?
To Blizzard's, yeah, according to Blizzard's timestamp.
Oh, wow. Oh, no way.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that.
That's insane. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Talk about absolute efficiency, absolute played, if it's the same second.
Yeah, I mean, like, these guys have so much experience practicing on private servers, and the talents are obviously using 1.11 12 values versus what they were in Blackwing Lair. The itemization is more powerful. Like at this point I think in vanilla WoW, a lot of the MC items weren't available at launch, so your gear was not as itemized going into Blackwing Lair. But yeah, it's it always goes back to that question of should Blizzard have a hard mode for Classic, or something that would more authentically replicate the challenges of vanilla. We talked about this when they had the 5-minute Alterac Valley games, because everyone assumes in vanilla the multi-day AVs. While it's very different in Classic, and I have these memories of you spent your weekend doing Blackwing Lair, and getting it down to 1 day was a big accomplishment. Like you were an awesome raid leader if you got it done in 1 day. And it's just so weird to see it just fall over instantly.
Yeah.
I think it was actually easier than Molten Core because at least with Molten Core you had the meta of needing to level up, and not everyone was level 60. And they wiped to Onyxia. I don't think they wiped in Blackwing Lair.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's just different. I think that there's still a big interest in Classic based on what I'm seeing, on Wowhead traffic and Twitch streams, and I think even Warcraft Logs just tweeted they had the highest amount of users on the site yesterday.
Cool.
But
I guess everyone's checking out, like, what should I be playing? What are people playing?
I think it would be really cool if they tried doing some more with it. I know the speedrunning community is really robust in Classic WoW, but I don't know. I'm sort of nostalgic for that.
Oh, that's a good point.
hard
Speedrunning can
mode.
definitely become a thing.
Yeah. Someone, Kira, the guy who made Warcraft Logs, I think has certain constraints set up to be put in speedrunning categories. So, for example, you can't use invis pots if you want to rank in the speedrunning category because that, would cheese a lot of the instance.
Gotcha. Yeah, that would be interesting, actually. Because imagine that, let's say you have a certain time that a guild has, right? And then months later, when there's not even that much hype about Classic anymore, some guild comes up and breaks their record. That would, bring people back together again to be like, oh, what happened here? Like, how did they do that? So that's interesting. I think that could be fun.
Yeah. So, I know, like I obviously run Classic Wowhead. Annie's super, you've played Classic before. You were getting ganked a lot leveling. I know Dratnos, you're more of a BFA guy, right?
Yeah.
So, like, just as an observer, like, what do you think when you hear, these Classic drops, or like, you just finished casting a world first race and then it's like, oh, Classic has been cleared in 40 minutes.
It's just a different thing, right? Like it's not about executing difficult mechanics and perfecting a strategy. It's about just doing the thing you have to do as fast as possible at this point, right? Because it's just all so solved. And it's been solved for 10 years now. I don't know. I don't think there's anything wrong with Classic, but I don't know how you can add back that authentic feel, because the thing that made it authentic back then was that we didn't know anything. Like we were in there and we were all so
it was
stupid
all new.
back then. Yeah.
We have, like,
we were stupid.
add-on or expertise knowledge.
Yeah.
And our computers were really bad too.
Yeah, we were like, the best guilds would maybe have some voice comms, but for the most part, you were just talking in in-game chat, or very, very laggy Ventrilo, or something like that. So I don't know. I don't think you can really. They could make some kind of hard mode for the Classic raids, but I don't know. I think that as soon as you kind of move away from the authentic part, you're gonna make more people unhappy than happy.
So we've been discussing a lot on the show, like, Blizzard announced this was happening in the summer. What does that mean for Shadowlands release date? I wonder now that, Blackwing Lair seemed to come out right when the World First race ended, and Blizzard just announced this special 50% off promotion to encourage people to buy game time for Classic. Does it feel like they're using Classic to, like, maybe fill in some of the BFA content gaps? Because I feel that happened with Dark Moon Fair as well. It just suddenly popped up a few weeks when there was a lull in BFA. I know they said that they didn't necessarily want to do that they didn't want to, put a BFA content gap to force people to Classic, but the timing does feel kind of interesting. How
I think it is intentional.
It worked out very well.
Yeah.
I mean, there's two options, right? Either you launch Classic content and BFA content at the same time, and then people complain about wanting to do both and not being able to.
That's what happened with Reforged, but then it crashed.
Right.
Yeah.
Or
and
you
there
launch them
were
at
a lot of
different times
complaints
and
about
they
it.
fill each other's gaps.
Yeah. I think it makes sense to just delay something by a week or two to make sure that they're, like, not overlapping each other. I don't think it necessarily means that one or the other is going to be more delayed because of the other one. But I think it's kind of healthy for the players and for Blizzard too, to kind of, put a little bit of a break between them, just so people don't feel so conflicted on what they're going to do, because there's a lot of Classic players who also play retail and other way around. So I mean, it is the same subscription even, so it does make sense to make sure they don't line up exactly on top of each other, but it doesn't I don't think it necessarily means that Blizzard will delay things because of the other.
I feel that the way Classic is turning out, that it seems like it's going to be filling the Shadowlands alpha or beta lull, especially if, I mean, I don't know what Blizzard has planned, but leading up to 8.2.5, they hid all the story elements of the war campaign. So you have to wonder if they want to hide more some parts of Shadowlands, or if they'll do like a different type of reveal because they don't want data mining out of context for something that could actually end up pretty cool. Like they don't want to have an ugly half-looking zone with a checkered box in the center as people's first impression of a zone. So I have to wonder if some of these mid-tier classic phases could be used when BFA is totally dead, especially the AQ opening, because I can see that being like a huge stream event.
Right, yeah, next time Blizzard realizes they need an extra hour of dev time on BFA, they can just release a new phase of Classic to fill that hour.
I think they might do that, yes. Definitely. Because the Classic content is already done, right? All they have to do is kind of like push the button and now it's live.
Well, there are, bug fixes. Like earlier today, they had to disable the Warsong Gulch portals because of an exploit. So it's not true. Just like, it's auto, playing itself. Yeah.
No, that's true. I meant in comparison to, making new content for, not for BFA, for retail. But yes, of course, there is some work put behind that as well. And also on the topic of changes and no changes, I don't know if you talked about this or if you discussed this on Wowhead, but they did change some of the battleground things. For example, you can no longer see which Ultric Valley game people are in, which completely killed the Discord communities that were creating pre-mades for Ultric Valleys. And they also now changed so that you can no longer see the opponent team, like what classes they have and who they are, until the game actually starts.
Scoreboard hotfix. Battleground scoreboards no longer list the enemy team until your entire team has clicked enter battleground. Scoreboard remains visible for everyone once it starts.
So these are changes, but from what I read on Twitter, most people seem to be happy about this. It's obviously changes from original Classic, but it's things that make the gameplay more just better. Maybe not more authentic to vanilla, but just
the
works
whole content rollout is different too. Like you have a lot of reputation recipes available now that were around in 1.6, and then if you go by that logic, people would have assumed Sunken Temple quests were coming in phase 4, not phase 3, but Sunken Temple stuff is in phase 3. Maybe they thought it made more sense, or they would have been, I don't know, obsolete rewards later on, who knows. But yeah, that's what's going on with Classic, and I feel like they're gonna save AQ for a kind of juicy lull. And it would be interesting with Naxxramas, because you're sort of going back to the Lich King and Death as a Shadowlands tie-in, and we do have that unsolved mystery in Shadowlands of the phylactery. Like, we lose it twice, and the second time we lose it in Wrath, it's just like, oh, he's lost in the Shadowlands. So that kind of might be an interesting tie-in if Kel'Thuzad or Naxxramas characters end up playing a role in Shadowlands, so you can experience that. Well, not very many people experience Naxxramas back in vanilla, probably more will in Classic, but it would be interesting if you could experience Phase 6 around the time of Shadowlands and kind of be like, oh, that's some background for what I'm seeing in Shadowlands.
And even if a lot of us may not have played the original Naxxramas, it's still something that we have kind of experienced indirectly, through watching videos or hearing stories, and also playing the Wrath version. So I think it does still become very relatable for a lot of people, and that does make it more fun.
There are 6 total Classic phases, right? And we just had the 3rd one launched today.
Yeah, well, they're more flexible, but it was 6 official, and they sort of have been blurring the lines with like, oh, Darkwind Fear will be a week earlier, and Dire Maul will be, but it's 6 or so rigid phases, but I feel like they're, blurring it.
So at the rate they're going now, we could see that 6th phase coming out around the same time as Shadowlands then. Maybe they want to get it done before Shadowlands as well, so that they can then ship all the Classic players who finish Classic onto Shadowlands.
Yeah.
I guess
I
that's
could see that.
possible.
That's
I'm
interesting.
kind of hyped for the new raids because, or not new, but the later raids because I'm hoping that not all of them will go down as fast as these previous ones have. What are your thoughts on that? When do you think the first points will be when it takes, over, let's say, 24 hours? Or is that even going to become a thing?
I mean, it's I think it would be cool to see something last longer, just because people, it makes for good entertainment, and that's how people remember vanilla as. I think that the only thing I would say is that I know in AQ, the optimal spec changes. So maybe there'd be a little more of a gearing up process. Like mages swap to fire, rogues get better gear, and they can swap their specs, use different weapons. Um, I know it would be really funny though. I know the joke is like, oh, Cthulhu was bugged in vanilla, so no changes. He should be
Unkillable.
super difficult. Yeah, he should be, ship him in his buggy state in classic. I think that'd be hilarious. I do think that the scepter unlocking the gates will definitely be faster because you have coordinated Twitch communities
Yeah,
coming together.
yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
I mean, it will. That will still be the. I think that will be the longest phase that we'll have, though, is the
Right.
war effort. Yeah, opening the
Right.
gates. I wonder how long that's going to take, though.
Yeah.
I wonder what the shortest time you could do it in. But I think that once raid teams are inside Encourage or Naxxramas, those are going to fall in hours as well, or less.
Yeah. I'm a little sad. I mean, like I spent like many hours. I was someone that didn't clear all of Naxxramas, but I got pretty far in there.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, obviously I've been aware of private servers and how people are skilled. So I'm not surprised. It's just like a time warp, like just noticing how much
Yeah,
stuff has changed when you look back
just
and you're like,
weird.
whoa, like I spent months in this instance,
Yeah,
and now it's just cleared in an hour.
yeah.
Yeah, it's just how far we've come as
Right.
a
As
total WoW
gamers.
playing community
Mm-hmm.
since
Yeah.
15 years ago. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I was so proud of that. I mean, like, wow, like really?
Mm-hmm.
I had a really terrible laptop back in the day, but
Yeah,
I thought it
actually,
was
that's a
yeah.
good point too. It's not only our skills and knowledge which is improved, also our setups. Random DCs is not so common anymore. Having like huge FPS or just MS lags and things like that aren't necessarily an everyday kind of thing for everyone. Of course, there's still a lot of people who may struggle with that, but it's not the norm. So we have evolved in so many ways, which just makes raiding itself so much easier. And that's why we need raids that are a lot more complex mechanics wise in today's raids.
Yeah. So, since we're talking about the scheduling of WoW Classic, I thought it might be interesting to end by talking about the earnings call for Q4 2019, because it also talked about content scheduling. But as a reminder, now is a good time to get some questions in if you have any about maybe things you wanted us to cover with Race to World First or esports, and we'll try to address them after the earnings call talk.
One fun thing about Blackwing Lair that I noticed was
Okay.
so for EU here, it launched at midnight, if I remember correctly, for people living in same time zone as me in Sweden. And I noticed that there were people in Blackwing Lair as max levels inside the instance on retail, apparently just studying the raid, getting excited for the raid coming out. And seeing that was quite cute. Like seeing max level characters randomly going to Blackwing Lair to study the different bosses and the different rooms to start planning what they're going to do in Classic. Yeah, it was just a fun little side thing that I just remembered.
I saw this really funny tweet in response to Wowhead where someone was like, how does this guild like clear it in 42 minutes on Classic? Like, why is it taking me 30 minutes to do my transmog run on retail as like
funny.
a max level character? Yeah, like
That's funny.
yeah. But yeah, so the earnings call. So obviously people have super studied. Everyone is an economy expert since earning calls have come out.
Of course.
They were popular back in the day when Blizzard announced subscriber counts, and then they stopped doing that for various reasons, but people still like to analyze them. And when we talk about Activision Blizzard, it's not just Blizzard Entertainment. You have things like, Call of Duty. You have things like Candy Crush. There are lots of different products that fall under the umbrella. So when they talk about how the company and conglomerate is doing, it is not a WoW-centric presentation. And Candy Crush is a very, very big game. It's
is.
like bigger than Overwatch. It's very, yeah. So with keeping that in mind, here are some of the notable things they said about WoW. They said, I'm quoting directly, Blizzard has a rapid cadence of follow-up content planned for Classic, as well as the Shadowlands expansion for retail World of Warcraft in the second half of 2020. So I guess Blizzard has confirmed what we were saying, that I guess they're going to pump up 2020 with all this Classic content and maybe have that crescendo into Shadowlands.
Yeah,
I hope
interesting word
Shadowlands is
choice of
good.
rapid.
Yeah, because if they use up Classic, then they they need more content, and I don't know. They can't really make more Classic phases.
Oh, we just get classic Burning Crusade.
I would be down with that. Like, I would be down with I mean, after a certain point, it might get weird, like Classic Warlords, but I would be down for, expansion year, classic, like retro.
Classic expansion year.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But would that be separate games though, or would you replace the current Classic with it?
Yeah, you have Classic working its way upwards, and then when Classic gets to BFA, we make a third Classic that goes back to
Like a
vanilla.
15-year process.
Like Classic BFA. Oh my god.
Yeah, so you just now you have 3
Brilliant.
timelines.
Oh
of
my
Azure.
god.
Yeah.
Yeah, just go all the way.
Which patch would you put it on though? Like patch 8.2 with essences or
Yeah.
launch?
Oh god.
That'd be a
Or
good time.
like overbalancing it for patch 8.3, like all essences are available. Go run retro Uldir with your own fabric essence. So you're still
No, it has to be the last patch. We need all the corruptions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Has to be that one.
I can picture this, like, world first race, like, so and so did not get their corruption items, so the raid took 5 minutes longer to clear.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Oh.
But yeah, so I guess that's gonna be a thing. But like I said, I just hope they have a backup plan, because it seems they didn't expect Classic to be the success it was, and it sort of has been running without a lot of like real hype or management. It feels like it just seems to be doing its thing, chugging along in the background.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know what they could do that wouldn't go against the no changes philosophy. Like,
yeah.
I don't know what more support they can give Classic without it actually hurting.
Yeah, I mean,
it's a really
they also then
difficult one.
said, World of Warcraft Classic continuous updates kept the size of the active WoW player base well above pre-Classic levels, and then they went on to say, WoW 2019, which is retail and Classic, ends with an active player community more than twice the size of its Q2 ending level. Active players defined as players with an active subscription or game time greater than 1 month. So clearly it's done miraculous things if it's doubled. And when they talk about end of 2019, that is several months after Classic came out. So they've still maintained a user plateau, which you don't always get after an expansion. Usually it's like a peak and then it just sort of goes back down drastically, but that's pretty amazing if it's plateaued, which we've seen on Wowhead too.
Yeah, that is actually really interesting.
So, I mean, if I were Blizzard, I would definitely be thinking of, can we do more retro games? Like, how do we continue this? Because it seems really unusual. Yeah, it seems really unusual to just double users without an expansion and keep that high number like 4 months after a game relaunch. That seems really good. So if I were Blizzard, I'd be like, yeah, Classic Burning Crusade, oh, do we have this raid from Classic we never released? Like, throw this in here too. Like, I would be thinking of all sorts of nostalgic things they could do properly, not like Reforged.
Oh, that's really interesting. If they could bring back things that they never put in the game.
Yeah, I mean, that I think that's probably not likely, but I know people like speculating about the Emerald Dream, and it just seems that Classic has done a lot for metrics, like even more than some expansions would do. The Classic had more of a long-lasting community than an expansion would after 4 months. Like, we saw a huge expansion drop off 4 or 5 months into BFA. It was like, back down to normal levels, but with Classic, it just people just stay with it. And I think you know, the suits of Blizzard, even if they're not gamers or they're cynical, I think they'd be like, oh, it's doing well. Let's do more of the thing that is doing record-breaking well for us.
And I think we have to also keep in mind here that it was really good as a deal for the subscription to include both games. Because I think that's also a large part of it, because people are more likely now to bounce between the two games, and people give the other game a chance because, well, I'm paying for it anyways, so I might as well. And I think that's also helped the numbers a lot.
Right, and it's like, if you hate something in BFA, you can have your best in slot list in Classic.
Yeah.
And if you're like, oh, you know, like Classic is repetitive and this raid is boring and dies really fast, then you can go back to BFA and do something more challenging with endgame content.
Yep.
So
yeah, it's a really nice kind of such like position that we're in, being able to switch between the two games. So it's it's really good. It's going to be interesting to see what will happen once all the raids have been released. Are we going to get a different ending? Are we going to progress towards TBC, or what's going to happen?
Yeah, I think TBC and Wrath would be good.
I think TBC
so too.
would be cool as well. I do think it would be kind of cool though for them to just stay in Classic and just keep going like new Classic content of some kind. Like you were saying, Emerald Dream, like that. That's a cool thing for them to do as well. That would keep it Classic instead of turning it into TBC.
If they're adding more content, then
why not
would
both?
They need to up the subscription count? I mean, subscription price? Because at the moment, it's kind of for free, I guess, in quotation marks, if you're already playing WoW, right? Or retail WoW. But if they eventually start adding content to it, that kind of does require more work from their end as well. So maybe that would have to change the like the build, the model of how they're putting the two games up.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, Classic was effectively free for everybody, right? So that they all the upfront work of adapting it, they've decided that the way they're going to make money from Classic is because it's going to have more people subbed at all times. So
and
if they can keep that,
and they have kept it apparently, so that's good.
At the start, they didn't really want to talk about Burning Crusade or Wrath Classic, but then I think, believe in May, they were talking about how they finally, now that they have the tech working to bring back these old products, that in theory they could entertain the idea of doing it. So it seems like that would be a pretty safe option for them, as opposed to saying, okay, now we need to pay developers for new old content and this and that. If porting Burning Crusade would be easier, or like maybe they could have a Classic server and then like a Burning Crusade server, and have that be different. Who knows? Like maybe you could play the Naxxramas, have Classic servers with Naxxramas in that bubble, and then you could have an option to elect to carry your character over and level in TBC with your Classic one. But I don't think Blizzard is going to say, okay, like now Classic is going away and it's going to be Burning Crusade.
Shut down servers.
Yeah. I don't think they're, after all the effort bringing it back, I don't think they will get rid of vanilla Classic.
I think that they will. Yeah.
Maybe they just open up new servers where they repeat the process. Yeah. I think that's what private servers do, right?
Your character onto a TBC server, or I guess they could just start you from level 1 in TBC. That'd be interesting.
I think it'd be really fun to experience the attunements in TBC, because those were pretty legendary.
Yeah.
And I think they were like loosened by the last patch, but I think it would be very interesting, because that was such a defining, iconic part of Burning Crusade, that it would be good if people could experience that. Or even things like the opening of the Sunwell, because it was similar, kind of similar AQ. Like you had to do different efforts, and not everyone got the bosses at the same time. And I'm sure that would be very interesting if there was a community, world first race, making sure your server is progressing towards helping you unlock the later bosses. And we just saw everyone loved Illidan and Legion. It feels like, oh, people like the expansion with Illidan. We have this other expansion with Illidan. Let's, bring Illidan back.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it would be neat, especially now that we got Demon Hunters, to be like, oh, like this was sort of the, I don't know, inspiration for Legion. So I think that would be cool. But yeah, that's about it for our show.
Yeah.
Do we have any esports or race to world first questions?
Yeah, if you have
That
any
you want to
questions,
answer?
feel free to put them in the chat. And I also want to say that Johnny One Long gifted a sub to Dratnos to the channel.
Thank you.
So,
Thanks, Johnny.
so thank you for supporting.
That's the guy who runs Future's Twitter, the Future Guild Twitter.
Awesome.
Oh,
Well, you have awesome Twitter.
So he's the meme god.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Nice. And I think that was all of those. It is indeed time to wrap things up now. I see a question. I just tuned in. Are they coming out with BC? No. We're just speculating.
Yeah.
We don't know.
Yeah,
did
we
not
don't
break
know
any news
rather.
about Classic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We think it would be both exciting if they did, and the suits at Blizzard would find it financially useful at Activision Blizzard because Illidan is popular and they have the tech to do this fairly easily. So it seems that on like financial fronts, but also player hype fronts, it would be fun to do. We're just speculating that if Blizzard is trying to cram lots of classic things in rapid fire, it works great when there is a lull in BFA content, but what happens if there's a lull in Shadowlands content? What are they going to do if they've used up Classic? So maybe they would have, TPC Classic coming in.
I see another question about very very popular topic. Any ideas Blizz will go alt friendly, closer to Shadowlands, Cloak quicker ? At this point, there's a few things I think we need to keep in mind. Cloak is not max, so everyone is still progressing their main character. And I think as long as we're still progressing our main character, I don't think the game will become more alt-friendly. Once everyone's rank 15, or not everyone, but let's say the majority of people are starting to be max ranked, I think that's when the question would become more relevant. I know there's still people who play alts anyways, but technically, if you're spending your time, upgrading your cloak and doing all dailies and all those things, that still takes a bit of time. It's not really that much extra time that you have to play the alts. I think that's probably the way that Blizzard is looking at it. So once you run out of things to do on your character, your cloak is maxed. You have experienced horrific visions with masks. I know I haven't experienced that. Once we have actually experienced everything on our main, I think that's when they'll decide to drop the news of, okay, you know what? Essences are now account wide, because at this point we have all done the horrific visions with the masks. We have maxed our cloak, and we're on the verge of potentially getting bored of the game, and that's when we need something new. And I think that's when it's gonna come. In terms of time frame,
content, essences are now account wide.
I don't think they could. I don't think they could make essences account wide at this point. There would just be so much like.
No, they have to though.
Yeah.
I think
There's
they
no
have
way.
to. Really, you don't think
There's
they
no way
will?
they'll do that. Yeah.
Well,
I
just
think
keep
they
doing
will.
these little tweaks. I mean, I feel like they've committed to their path of just making things easier to get versus account wide, like the exalted to revered thing.
Yeah.
So.
Okay,
I
so
don't know, maybe,
you mean just basically nerfing the requirements so it's a lot quicker? I mean, I guess that's also possible, but there's some essences that still takes, I think, a couple of weeks at least, and I think that will be changed to be possible within a day or two, at least.
I agree that it should be changed, but I think at this point it's too late. The time to do it was like 4 months ago now, and I think that if they change it at this point, it'll just look I don't know. It'll be like, it'll just bring it back up again, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I was thinking of Lucid Dreams. I just don't see them not nerfing those to just being a couple days or something, because at the end of the expansion,
making them easier to get,
Yeah, because let's say we have a month left of the expansion. Why should I play an alt if it'll take me a month to maximize one of the ranks that I want, or one of the essences that I want? I think at that point, when there's not many days of the expansion left, then I think it does make sense to nerf all of the essence acquisitions. I think, at least. Not the legendary, of course, because that's purely cosmetic anyways, but I think to get to rank 3 will become a lot easier. Yeah, the grind to
I can
get
see
it.
that. Yeah.
So maybe not straight up account wide, but I think, taking it down to just take a couple days at max, I think will happen.
That would definitely be good, yeah.
Yeah.
But not yet, because we're not even done with our main characters. It's not time
and
yet.
LFR isn't even out yet, and usually Blizzard does more tweaks after LFR is out. It's like, okay, now canonically everyone has encountered or progressed through the raid if they so choose, and they make tweaks after.
Sure, sure.
Yeah.
So even the casual raider will have potentially completed the raid, at least on LFR difficulty. Yeah, that sort of wraps up everything that we wanted to talk about today. The show went on longer than I expected because there weren't that many topics, but a lot of these topics we're very passionate about, so it ends up becoming, longer discussions. So it's been great. Dratnos, thank you very, very much for joining us today. And it's been lovely having your input, especially. It feels like the timing was amazing with all of the world first things.
Great.
Yeah, and the esports announcements. Everything just worked well together. It was awesome. So thank you very much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me. It was good to be here.
Yeah.
And shout out to Dratnos' social media. According to, other side. Yep, perfect.
Yeah.
Dratnos on all social medias. Twitch, YouTube, and Twitter. Should look him up. There's a shout out for him. No shout out to Teddles. And we will see the rest of you guys next week, same time. And apparently we have a clip of Dratnos Eats People.
Oh
Are we
no.
going to play the clip or are we just linking it?
It's being linked in the chat, so feel free to check it out. Make it immortal.
Yep. Next time you do a Wowhead article in your bio will be like, Dratnos has a Twitch and a YouTube and he also eats people.
Yeah.
That's great. I'm looking forward to that.
That's
you do like,
great.
what DPS should I do in Mythic plus Shadowlands? You put that in your bio.
The guest for our next show is secret, but he eats people. There's your hint. But yeah, thank you very much, Dratnos. And Perk, amazing job with everything as usual. And we will see the lovely peoples in the chat and on the front page of Wowhead as well next week, same time.
Yep.
Are there
We
any
just do a high
last
five.
words? Oh yeah, the high five. Okay.
Yeah.
So Perk and I are gonna hold our hand up towards the side of the screen. Perk, you need to go the opposite direction this time. Yeah.
This way. Okay.
And
Okay.
we are hoping that you're able to high five both of us at the same time.
Okay.
So you hold your hands up, one higher, one lower.
Okay. Oh, both of you. Okay. All right. I'm using push to talk, so you won't be able to hear me once I
Oh,
release
okay.
this button.
That's fine.
Okay.
Oh.
That's fine. Perfect. Okay.
Okay, so I'm gonna count down, and then we're going. And on the count of 3, we're going to
Yes.
move our hands. All right.
Okay.
Okay. 1, 2, 3.
Perfect. Yay! We did it.
You go first, talk, okay.
Even people who can eat people can high five. That's great to know. In case
Yeah,
I meet
easy.
someone else.
That's much easier than the triangles and stuff that we make on the podcast I do.
Oh, I need to check out your podcast. So where is your podcast? On
It's
what?
the Titan Forge podcast, which we might have to rename if they never bring back Titan Forging.
Rip Titan
We're on
Forging.
YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, and on my Twitch stream every Saturday.
Okay, so
It's me.
it's played on
Yeah.
your Twitch stream. Gotcha.
Yeah, it's me, Teddles, and Trell, who are all American
American
players.
boys. Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'll definitely check it out. You guys in the chat should too. And hope to see you in the near future again. And
Thanks for having me on.
bye-bye, everyone in chat. See you all next week. Same time.
Happy
Bye.
Valentine's Day.
Oh, yes. Happy Valentine's Day.
Yeah, not as in Sweden for Annie. Yeah.
True. It's been Valentine's Day for 54 minutes. Time to cuddle my cats.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.